Chapter 3449. The appearance of young geniuses who were famous in the Devata realms attracted many people's attention. Of course, there were also many people who were not well known, but were not weak. Few people knew them, so when they appeared, they were almost forgotten and did not attract any attention. Duan Lingtian was unaware that two of his acquaintances had come to participate in the Devata realms battle of the geniuses. He was unaware that most of the young geniuses who had come to participate in the Devata realms battle of the geniuses thought he was only here to watch the show. Most of them thought he was only slightly over 600 years old, so it was impossible for him to perform well in the Devata realms battle of the geniuses. As the saying went, there was no dispute. Where there were people, there would be disputes. In the Devata realms battle of the geniuses, there were disputes. There were only a few gods in the Devata realms no one had ascended to godhood. The people from the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven who was in charge of monitoring the Devata realms battle of the geniuses would not interfere. Who was ranked first of the young geniuses here were younger than 1,000 years old. From today onward, they were still top geniuses, the heavenly emperor over the Devata heaven, and the strongest among them, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. For this reason, to have become the person in charge of monitoring the Devata realms battle of the heavenly palace, many people had long speculated that there was more than one god titled Celestial Emperor. Otherwise, only a titled Celestial Emperor with the records of all the Devata realms in the long history of the Devata realms. Young geniuses today all over the Devata realms. The heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven had revealed his strength as a god who passed the tidal temple's test and obtained the right to participate in the Devata realms battle of the geniuses. In the Xin Yuan heaven had from the Lang Yuan heaven who so young? According to the rules of the Tidal Temple, and a prodigy from the Lang Yuan heaven were kill Feng Qingyang. In the end, the prodigy from the Jade Emperor heaven mentioned that there was a young prodigy in the Jade Emperor heaven who had passed the tidal solitary destructive heaven, obtained the qualification to participate in the battle of the geniuses in the Devata realms at the age of 600 Devata realms. To a certain extent, gods were above the Devata realms. Not to be outdone, such existences should go to the realms of the Jade Emperor staying in the Devata Emperor branch hall's assessment. Even if they were to stay in the Devata realms, a 600-year-old man actually passed the assessment. This was something that the Tidal Temple had always done. The Jade Emperor, the Tidal Temple, is trying to expel strength is ranked at the top among all of us who have passed the Tidal Temple's test. It said that it's one of the Tidal Temple's duties to expel gods from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. In the Jade Emperor's eyes, many of the young geniuses present on the scene knew about the Tidal Temple. Just like that, most of them were unaware of Emperor Heaven's genius fought fiercely. Why didn't the Tidal Temple expel the heavenly emperor of the G Brahma heaven from the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven to that of a titled celestial emperor? Moreover, this scene didn't surprise the onlookers. On the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven. The genius from Jade Emperor Heaven actually said that there was a heavenly emperor of the G Brahma stronger than him. Has long become a god. Was close to that of a titled celestial emperor of the G Brahma heaven. Was stronger than him. Celestial emperor. That person have to be a titled celestial as a god, and he's about to be dragged down. Titled celestial emperor. Why is this so unfair? Oh my God! Well, it's not even unfair. In the history of the Devata according to my seniors, a titled celestial the heavenly emperor who's over 600 years old is as rare as by more than one god or a Chilan's horn. However, really? None of those gods were able to defeat Jiyu titled Celestial Emperor in the Jade Emperor Heaven of the heavenly palace of G Brahma Heaven. Many people remembered the heavenly secret. Heavenly secret. Suli is only slightly over 600 years old, and you actually know already a titled Celestial Emperor. Heavenly Heavens, Heavenly Heaven heard many people talking about Heavenly Master as soon as he walked out of the wooden house. Celestial You Heavens, a genius from the Jade Emperor Heaven. If the legendary Heavenly Emperor has improved a lot over the years. I've heard that the reason why the heavenly emperor of his position as the heavenly is able to remain as the heavenly Jade Emperor Heaven, unfortunately, is because anyone will be allowed to watch the battle between such a visited master of tribulations. If it's only natural that he were in my own territory, I would be willingly have made a race after becoming a god. With my tribulations, if my cultivation is gone, it would not be difficult for Suli to rise there to witness this battle. Moreover, it's no secret that the rest of my land has a supreme Although I'm more than 800 years old, I'm willing to sacrifice 200, no matter what, 300 years of my cultivation decree to watch their battle who could lead the similar discussions could be heard among God spectators in the Devada realms battle of everyone had high hopes. The group of young geniuses wanted to personally witness the battle between the two gods. Would be able to defeat even if they were there of the Jade Emperor Heaven and clearly see the movements of the two gods. Would the thousand tribulations sword they still wanted to see the final in the Jade Emperor Heaven. They wanted to see who would win and who would lose, and whether or not someone would people's attention. Whether it was the battle between the two gods or the death of a god, disciple it was the legendary to brag about for the rest of their solitary destructive heaven. At this moment, Duan Lingtian had a deep frown on his face. However, what can he achieve at the age of his master? Feng Qingyang, both of them are over 600 years old, but I'm afraid Su Li was not the someone to be trifled with since he dared to challenge his master. Many people compared Su Li to Duan Lingtian. In the ancient myths and legends of my previous life on Earth, he was an almost invincible existence. However, moreover, when he did not care about this at all. His expression was as calm as confirmed the location of the people from the title temple's branch in the Jade Emperor Heaven before he made his way there. To a certain extent, this is a display in the Jade Emperor Heaven were gathered together. When Duan Lingtian in just a blink of an eye, many people from the Jade Emperor Heaven's battle of geniuses was bound to be a topic of discussion for a long time to figure out the purple-clad young man's identity when they heard the voice who had revealed his god-level cultivation base had defeated the person who was ranked of the legendary heavenly emperor ranking in just one move had shocked everyone. Feng Qingyang. Then he killed another heavenly emperor had a 600-year-old titled Celestial Emperor, the Hall Master of the purple-clad young man was comparable to the legendary heavenly emperor of the Jade Emperor Heaven. That he would challenge the heavenly in the history of the Devada realms. There were very few titled celestial emperors who were as young as Duan Lingtian. It was rare for two titled celestial emperors to exist in the same era. Before the Devada realms battle of geniuses began, Tathagata Buddha with a smile on his face as he looked at a young genius from the various Devada realms. Please calm down. For Su Li? The Devada realms battle of the Jade Emperor will begin in an hour. Slightly. The person in charge of the Devada realms battle of geniuses was none other than the vice true disciple of the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Hall master of the main temple was after being told that you're weaker than masters of the title temple. However, I advise you that it's best that you don't do that. Nobody knew where the title temple's main hall was. Some said it was in a Devada realm, as a new title was celestial in a mundane realm. Based on his words, it was in a realm of gods. He was trying to dissuade Duan in an independent realm created by a supreme powerhouse outside of the Devada realms. Knew the young genius had misunderstood him. The title temple's branch lit up when he heard the young genius knew about. Nobody knew where the title temple's main temple celestial emperor. In fact, it was said that even the vice hall masters of the title temple did not know where the main temple was located. You've misunderstood me. Although they had been to the main temple, they had been sent there through the transporting formation and said, "I'm not here to spar with Su Li. Su Li is my friend. Hall master of the title temple's main temple." The young genius from the Jade Emperor Heaven was shocked by Duan Lingtian's main temple. He did not expect young man would be acquainted with the only true disciple. He had a pair of the legendary heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. And he looked valiant. Moreover, he was tall and muscular. Even claimed when he looked around, was his friend. It was obvious he was looking down on everyone. The young genius from the Jade Emperor Heaven knew of the title temple's main about being his friend. The rumor is true. Talent and strength might be higher than his, someone to preside over the Devada realms battle of geniuses. And even the future Su Li would have to look up to him. Main hall with the young genius from the Jade Emperor Heaven leading the vice palace masters. Even the elders in the main hall are as strong as the palace masters of the title temple's branches in the Devada realms. Heartily when he saw Duan Lingtian. Master Su must be a god as well. I heard from them that you've been in closed door cultivation since the moment you arrived, with a burning gaze. So I didn't disturb you. Most of the people present on the scene, including the heavenly emperors of the Devada realms from the Jade Emperor Heaven, this mysterious vice palace master of the main hall before. It seems like the people present on the scene, including the heavenly emperors of the various Devada realms, it feels like they've been good friends for many years. Mysterious vice palace master before. Know such a person? Most of them were heavenly emperors who had lived the Jade Emperor Heaven were discussing among themselves. When they thought about the Devada realms battle of geniuses that would begin in an hour, they withdrew their gazes from Su Konghai. After both of them entered, they sat at the wooden table in front of the bed. Many young geniuses closed their eyes to meditate and calm down. Since we last met. Their opponents in the Devata realm's battle of geniuses were all geniuses from different Devata realms. I've been well. Even the slightest change in their emotions could cause them to be defeated and eliminated. Has spared no effort in nurturing there were also some young geniuses who were chatting with the people around a lot of pressure. Because I know that they have high hopes for me. Realm's battles of geniuses reached the end of his sentence, 1,000 people would be eliminated in the first round. And the remaining 1,000 people would enter the second round. Tian asked. Su Li was familiar with the Devata realm's tribulations of geniuses in the past. He learned from Zhuge Feng, after the remaining 1,000 people entered the second round, about the sect's future prospects. Until only 300 people entered the third round. Had high hopes. Although 300 people have entered the third round of the Jade Emperor 700 people who were eliminated will have 3 chances to challenge any one of the 300 even people. Zhuge Feng had reminded him is the most intense part of the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Feel pressured. After based all, on your word, the 700 people who are eliminated might not be eliminated because they're weaker than the other 300 people. Some of the 300 people must have relied on others to enter the third round. I already knew about it the last time we met. The third round of challenges, since the person who told me about this told me not to tell you, it's not convenient for me to tell you. I've heard about it. Moreover, I'm afraid it might affect you if I tell you. He had heard about this from his master, Feng Qingyang. There's no turning back now. Round would determine the top tribulation people in the Devata realm's battle of geniuses. I can only help them achieve their goals would enter the fourth round and fight fiercely. You can do it. The ranking of the top 300 people would be determined. Perhaps, after all, I'll have the heavenly emperor as my friend one day. Were different. The higher the ranking, the better the rewards. 3450. As for the remaining still have a long way to go. People who were eliminated, there was no reward. The bitter smile on Su Li's face widened. This was because even if there was a reward for them, it would not be anything good. And said enviously, they might no matter how hard I work, and I'll only be able to just a blink of an eye. Emperor of the Jade Emperor Heaven. I hereby announce the start of the Devata realm's battle of the legendary Heavenly Emperor of the solitary destructive Heaven. Master of the Do you know how many people envy you? Who was presiding over the Devata realm's battle with the help of the legendary Heavenly Emperor? You'll definitely be enlightened. Not loud, after all, deafening the legendary Heavenly Emperor is the fastest to rise among all the Heavenly Emperors in the Devata realms. Chapter 3460. But his rise is legendary as well. Geniuses who are participating in the Devata realms battle of the geniuses are to rise 10 meters into the air unexpectedly and said, Duan Lingnan, the Vice Palace Master of the main hall of the Tidal Temple, when will you bring me to meet the legendary Heavenly Emperor? Those who don't rise into the air will be disqualified. He's from the same mundane realm as me, finished speaking, and he's so accomplished in just 10,000 years. Seats rose into the air relationship with Duan Lingtian. From the spectator stands, a total of more than 2,000 people stepped into the air. Heaven. Looking from afar, they looked like locusts that had woken up from a deep slumber. The first absolute of the 7 absolute sect, Duan Lingtian, as a sword celestial, and Ling had an inexplicable sense of admiration for also rose to a height of 10 meters. I'll ask my master if he's free now. We're going to start the first round of elimination. Su Li's words, although Duan Lingtian sent a message to his master, to eliminate more than 1,000 people in the first round. He smiled and said, he did not expect they would be asked to rise into the air. He's very impressed with your innate talent and spacious areas before the first round of elimination. How can I compare to you? It's similar to the test to enter the heavenly pool. I was brought to the 1,000 tribulations sword sect from the mundane realm, but you ascended to the Devata realm on your own. In the boundless heaven. Su Li was very clear about his and Duan Lingtian's encounters. At that time, compared to Duan Lingtian, he was more like a flower was in charge of overseeing the test to enter the heavenly pool. Truly relied on himself to get to where he was today. All the young geniuses in the auditorium had stepped into the air and reached a height of 10 meters. As soon as he had arrived in the Devata realms to receive the best training. Continued in a clear voice. Occasionally went out to train. I'll be exerting pressure protected, on you. So he anyone did not who falls to the ground will be eliminated. Unlike Duan Lingtian, when there are 1,000 people left, once he encountered danger on there was all only a slim chance of survival. You have 10 breaths to prepare. Master wants us to go now. As soon as Su Konghai's words came out, quickly received a message from his young geniuses in the void became extremely solemn. He immediately stood up and said to Su Li with a smile. Energies of various colors revolved around the surface of their bodies. Lit up. Clearly, at the same time, they were all beginning to accumulate power, involuntarily to resist on his the incoming pressure. He was clearly a little nervous. The pressure came from Su Konghai, the vice palace master of the main hall of the Tidal Temple, who was looked at what he was wearing and asked nervously, They knew
Duan
that
Lingdun
Su
shook his
Konghai
head
would
helplessly
helplessly
when he
full
saw
strength
Su
against
Li's
them.
anxious
At
expression.
most, he would exert
Su
some
Li,
pressure on
master, is
them.
very
If a powerhouse
easygoing.
of this level
There's
were to
no
go
need
all
for you to
out,
worry too
the
much.
pressure would envelop
Even
them.
so,
Even if they
can't
didn't
help
die,
but feel nervous.
they would be crippled.
Su Li
Ten
smiled
breaths
wryly.
were gone in the blink of an eye.
After all, he's an
At this
invincible
moment,
sword celestial,
most of the young
a
geniuses
legendary
present
heavenly
held their
emperor.
breaths.
Before
There were
entering
only
the
a few
Azura
hundred
Hell,
people
one
who
of
were
the
still
seven
able to
deadliest
maintain their
places in the
composure.
Devata realms.
These hundreds of
Feng
people
Qingyang
included
was
Duan
widely
Lingtian,
acknowledged
Su
as an
Li,
invincible
Ling
sword
Juin,
celestial
Tang
in the
Sanpao,
solitary
and Zhang
destructive
Tianyu.
heaven.
Most
However,
titled
after
celestial
coming out of the
emperors were
Azura
calm
Hell,
at this moment,
Feng Qingyang
because
was
they all
widely
knew that they
acknowledged
would
as an
not be
invincible
eliminated
sword
in the first
celestial
round.
in the Devata realms.
With their strength,
there was no
suspense
celestial
in passing
in the
the first
Devata
round.
realms who was a
Those
match
who
for
were
him.
not titled
Naturally,
celestial
many
emperors
people
would
said
be
that
eliminated
since
in the
Feng
first
Qingyang was
round.
suspected to have
For
attained
example,
godhood,
Wang Ting
he should
and
not
He
be
Jianyi,
called a
who
sword
were beside
celestial but a
Zhang
sword
Tianyu.
god instead.
Both of their expressions
However,
were
no
extremely
matter what,
grave,
Feng
as if they were
Qingyang was like
facing
a
a
flag
great
in the
enemy.
eyes of the sword celestials
Crash.
in the Devata realms.
Su Konghai
As one
didn't
of the
seem to have
sword
made any
celestials in the
movements,
Devata
but
realms,
an invisible
Su
pressure
Li could not
suddenly
help but
extended
feel
from his
anxious
body,
when he learned he
enveloping
was
them
about
more
to
than
meet the
2,000
invincible
young
sword
geniuses
celestial.
present. More than
It was
half
only
of the
when he
young
saw Feng
geniuses'
Qingyang
bodies
that Su
trembled.
Li's mood
Many of them
gradually
began
calmed
to
down.
vomit blood or
Greetings,
bleed from their
Senior
7
Feng
orifices.
Although
Su
they
Li
tried
bowed
their best to
respectfully
withstand
at
the pressure,
Qingyang.
their bodies
Feng
were
Qingyang
still on the
nodded
verge
and
of
smiled at
collapsing.
Su Li.
Due to
Su
Su Konghai's
I've heard
pressure,
about you from
a
Little
few hundred
Tian.
people were
You're
injured
not
in
simple
the
to be
second
able to
round
come
of the
so
second
far
round.
after leaving your hometown.
The third
The
round
Saint
of the
Province
second
realm
round arrived
in
as
the
the history
expected.
of the Saint
This
Province
time,
realm. More
there had
than
been
100
many
people
people
who had
who had
ascended to
withstand
the
the pressure
Devata realm
and fell from the sky.
However, most of them had died in accidents after
A few
ascending
hundred
to the
people
Devata
were
realms.
injured,
And their
even if
bodies
they did
were
not
on the
die,
verge of
they
collapsing.
did not accomplish much.
In the fourth
Only
round
a few
of
of
the
them
second
managed
round
to
of the
make a
second
name for
round,
themselves.
hundreds of
In
people
the
fell
past,
from the
when
sky
Feng
like
Qingyang
dumplings
had
being
just
dropped
ascended
into
to
the
the pot.
Devata realms.
I'm still
He did not have
eliminated.
such a feeling. Many
He
people
had
who
met
fell
many
from the
people
sky
and met many
smiled
people
bitterly.
from various mundane
I was willing
realms,
to pass
but
the
he had
first
never
round,
heard of
but
anyone
I didn't
who was
expect to be
extraordinary
eliminated
and came
in the
from the
first
Saint
round.
Province realm.
My strength
Naturally,
is close
he could
to that
understand
of a
this.
titled
After
celestial
all,
emperor.
there were many
I didn't
mundane
expect to be
realms.
eliminated
The
so
Saint
easily.
Province realm was
I was
not
too
considered
careless.
a large mundane
I thought
realm
I had hidden
among
my
the mundane
strength,
realms,
but I didn't expect
After
to be
all,
eliminated
the Saint
because of
Province
it.
realm had Duan Ling
Palace
Tian,
Master
Duan
Su's
Ling
fourth
Tian,
round of the
and
second
Su Li.
round of the
There were
second
many
round
mundane
eliminated
realms
more
like
than
the Saint
500
Province
people.
realm,
But
Isn't
until
the
now,
speed of
there were
elimination
no
a little too
outstanding people
fast?
in the mundane
At
realms.
this moment,
Among
those
the
who were
Devata
eliminated,
realms, including
the most
Duan
famous
Lingtian and the
large-scale
other
mundane
titled
realms were the
celestial
emperors,
emperors,
realm.
discovered that
For
more than
example,
half of the
the
people who
powerful
were still
titled
standing in the
celestial
sky
emperors
were
and
on the
many
verge of
powerful
collapsing.
forces in the Jade
Some of them
Emperor
had
heaven
pale
were from
faces.
Yen Huang realm.
It was obvious
Even
they
the
had just
heavenly
suffered a
emperor
great
of the
deal
Jade
of pressure.
Emperor heaven was from the
After
Yen
the fifth
Huang
round,
plane.
I'm
Apart
afraid the
from the
first
Yen
round
Huang
will
realm,
end. There were
a heavenly
several other
emperor from the
mundane realms
Devata
as well.
realm said as he
Many
looked at the
powerful
scene
figures
before him.
and forces had
Another
emerged
heavenly
one after
emperor
another.
from a Devata
Not
realm
only that,
nodded in
but they
agreement.
were also deeply
Based
rooted
on the
in the
current
Devata
situation,
realms. That's indeed
Senior
the
Feng
case.
Qingyang,
As
you
soon
must
as
be
the two
joking.
heavenly emperors
Su Li
finished
smiled
speaking,
wryly
Su
when he heard
Konghai,
Feng
the
Qingyang's
vice
praise.
palace master of
I'm
the
just
titled
lucky.
temple and the
When I
person
was
in
still
charge
in
of
the Saint
presiding
Province
over the
realm,
Devata
I
realms
accidentally
battle
went
of
to
the
Yen
geniuses,
Huang realm and
launched
obtained
the
the
fifth
legacy
round
of
of
the
the
second
second
round
round
of
of
the
the
second round.
tribulation sword
At this
sect.
moment,
Even
then
the
I
young
was brought
titled
to the
celestial
thousand
emperors who were standing in the sky had a solemn
If it
expression
weren't
on
for
their
that,
faces.
I wouldn't have been
Some
able to
people's
achieve
bodies
much
trembled
even if I
slightly.
ascended to the
It was
Devata
obvious
realms
the
on
fifth
my own.
round of the second
I'm not
round
like
was
you
even
and
stronger.
Duan Lingtian,
Naturally,
Senior Feng
there were
Qingyang.
also those who were not
Both of you
affected by the
relied
fifth
on your
round,
own strength
such as
to
Duan
reach where you are
Lingtian,
today.
Su Li,
Su
Ling
Li
Juin,
sighed.
and Tang Sanpao.
Su Li, that's not
Even
right.
Yu Dongfang,
Feng
the third
Qingyang
true
shook his head
disciple of
and
the
said,
heavenly emperor
fortuitous
Xianyuan,
encounters
who was
are
seated
also
opposite
part of
Duan
one's strength.
Lingtian,
There
was
are
not
so many
affected by
people
the
in
fifth
Yen
round
Huang
of the
realm.
second round.
Why did
On
you,
the other
who's
hand,
not from
Tong
Yen
Tu,
Huang realm,
the fourth true
obtain the
disciple
disciple of the heavenly emperor from the Thousand Tribulations sword expression on the Jade Emperor Heaven. Junior brother, this is your luck, it seems like Duan and your strength. The true disciple of the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, luck is also a part stronger than you. Fu Dongfang glanced at Duan Lingtian in the distance. With his eyes, it was not difficult for him to see Duan Lingtian's current calm expression. The reason I was able to make a name for myself when I ascended to the Devata realms was because I came across a few sword celestial relics and obtained some fortuitous encounters that allowed me to perfect my sword unwilling he was to admit it. If it weren't for that luck, no choice but to admit that Duan Lingtian was not weaker than him. When he heard Feng Qingyang's he didn't want to admit it. Realization dawned on him as he said, "This doesn't mean anything. Thank you for your reminder. Maybe he's good at defense or good at resisting this kind of pressure." All right. Feng Qingyang nodded. Yu Dongfang only shook his head when he heard this and said, He didn't say before the Devata because he knew his junior brother very well.
You can stay by my side
the young
so I can
geniuses
observe
who
your
were titled
techniques.
celestial emperors.
Thank
They
you,
were either
Senior
unaffected
Feng
or
Qingyang.
only slightly
Su Li
affected.
was overjoyed.
On the other hand,
He
the
knew
young
that the
geniuses
legendary
who had yet to
heavenly
become
emperor
titled
of the solitary
celestial
emperors
heaven was
in a good
obviously trying to
situation.
give him some pointers by saying this.
Hundreds of young
Duan
geniuses
lit up
spat
as well.
out
mouthfuls of
He
blood
quickly
at the same
thanked
time.
Feng Qingyang.
Many fell from
Thank
the
you,
sky,
Master.
while
Naturally,
some were still
he
hanging
knew
on.
that the reason why
Those
his
who were
master
hanging
treated
on began
Su
to
Li
fall
so
from the
well was
sky one
mostly
after
because of
another.
him.
It
After
was
all,
as though they were
Su Li was
queuing
a
up
good
to
friend
land.
of his.
The number
Su
of
Li
young
was allowed by
geniuses in the
Feng
sky
Qingyang to
continued to
cultivate with him.
dwindle. Duan
One thing
Lingtian
I
did
can't
not
hold on
disturb
any
them and
longer.
returned to his
You
wooden
hang in
house.
there.
However,
He,
less
who
than
was
2
2
days
days
after he
Duan
returned, he
Lingtian
received
looked
a message.
wretched.
His
Duan
face was as
Lingtian,
pale as
are
a
you
sheet
here?
of paper.
To Duan
He could not
Lingtian,
hold on any
this
longer
voice
and
seemed
fell
a little
from the
distant.
sky.
It
At
was
the same
familiar
time,
yet
he
unfamiliar.
did not forget to use
However,
the last of
he
his
quickly
strength to
confirmed the
encourage
identity
Wang
of the
Ting,
person
who was on
who
the
had sent
verge
the
of
message.
collapsing.
Where
Among
are
the
you?
3 people
Duan
from the
Lingtian
heavenly palace
asked.
of the solitary
I'm on my
destructive
way
heaven,
to the heavenly
Zhang
palace.
Tianyu,
Duan
Wang Ting,
Lingtian
and he
replied.
Jinny, Zhang
The
Tianyu
Devata
was the
realm's
strongest.
battle of the geniuses?
Zhang Tianyu was
Duan
a titled
Lingtian
celestial
asked again.
emperor. Although his face
Duan
was slightly
Lingtian
red
replied
and his
again.
body trembled slightly,
Let's talk when we
he did
arrive.
not seem to be affected
Duan
by the 5th
Lingtian's
wave.
eyes lit up
On the other
immediately.
hand, Wang
Apart
Ting,
from
who was standing
Su Li,
next to
Duan
Zhang Tianyu, was
looked as
also
though she would
worried about
fall at any
another
moment.
person who might come
However,
to the heavenly
when Wang
palace
Ting
of the
heard
primeval
Jinny's
heaven
words,
to
she
participate
seemed
in
to
the
have regained
Devata
her
realm's
strength.
battle of the
Although
geniuses.
she was on the verge
That
of
person was
collapsing,
none
she
other than Ling
stubbornly
Juiyun.
held on.
Ling
Wang
Juiyun was
Ting,
one of his few
just hang in
friends.
there for a little
Moreover,
longer and you'll be
they
able
had
to
gone
pass
through
the
life
first
and
round.
death situations
Zhang
together.
Tianyu looked at
Although
his
he had not
surroundings
known
and
saw
Ling
there were
Juiyun
only
for as long
slightly
as
more
Su
than
Li, he still
1,000
regarded
young
Ling
geniuses
Juiyun
left.
as an important friend.
You'll be able to pass
After
the
so
second
many
round
years,
if less
Duan
than 100
Lingtian
people
finally
are
received
eliminated.
a message from
Upon
Ling Juiyun.
hearing Zhang Tianyu's
Moreover,
words, Ling Juiyun was
Wang Ting
also
took a deep
from the
breath
primeval
and
heaven
continued
and
to
was
hold
on
on.
his way to the
At this
heavenly
moment,
palace
she
of the
had
primeval
completely
heaven to
unleashed her
participate in the
potential.
Devata realm's battle
A
of the
soft
geniuses
sound
held
rang
by
in
the
the
air
title
as the
temple
2
every
profundities from the
1,000
law
years.
of water merged
It's been
and
so
spread
many
out.
years.
Wang
I wonder
Ting
how
seemed to have
strong
calmed
he is
down a
now.
little. In the next
Duan
moment,
Lingtian's
Wang
eyes
Ting's pale
flashed as he
face
thought
gradually
curiously
returned
in
to
his heart.
normal. At the
Her
same
eyes
time,
glinted
he
sharply
contacted
as
Huang,
she looked at Duan Lingtian.
the sword soul of the 7
broke
orifices
through?
exquisite
Zhang
sword.
Tianyu's eyes widened in shock.
Ling
It was not
Juiyun is on
difficult
his
for
way to
Duan
participate
Lingtian to
in the
see that
Devata
Wang
realm's
Ting had
battle
broken
of the
through the
geniuses.
last hurdle and
Although
entered the
Huang
realm of
had
titled
acknowledged
celestial
Duan
emperors.
Lingtian as her
Currently,
master, she
Wang
would
Ting's
only
strength
obey
was
Duan
comparable to
Lingtian's
that
orders.
of an ordinary
However,
titled
when she
celestial
heard
emperor.
Duan Lingtian
Most
mention Ling
importantly,
Juiyun,
her
profundities
did
from
not
the law
change
of
at all.
water had merged.
She only replied
She broke
indifferently.
It's
These
good
2
that he's
brats
here.
actually managed
This
to break
means he's
through
improved
and become
a lot over the
titled
years.
celestial emperors
As
under
soon as
such
Huang
circumstances.
finished speaking,
a
while
voice
Wang
rang
Ting
from
was
outside.
breaking through. A
Duan
young
Lingtian
man who was
come
hovering
out.
in the air
If it
above
was
the
a normal
spectator
voice,
area had
the
also
soundproof
broken
formation
through and
in the wooden
attracted the
house would have
attention of
blocked it out.
many heavenly emperors.
However, this
Wang
voice
Ting
was
was the
transmitted
granddaughter
through the
of
divine
Meng Luo's
consciousness,
friend.
so Duan
Meng Luo,
Lingtian
who was
could hear
standing
it clearly.
behind Feng Qingyang,
Duan
could not
Lingtian
help but
frowned.
smile when he saw
Who was this
Wang
person?
Ting breaking through.
Based on the voice,
Brother
he did
Feng,
not recognize
this little
this
girl
person
from
at
the
all.
heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven
Chapter
is not
3451.
bad. It's rare for
It was
someone to break
impossible for
through
him
under
not to
such
go out
circumstances.
since the newcomer's tone
Ding
was
Fu,
unfriendly.
the heavenly
If he did
emperor
not
of
go
the
out,
primeval
his
heaven,
cultivation
said to
would be
Feng
affected.
Qingyang with a smile on his
After
face.
Duan Lingtian pushed
Qingyang
open the
nodded.
door and walked
A
out,
hint of
he
surprise
noticed
that
that many
seen in his
gazes were
eyes.
converged on him.
After Wang Ting
Moreover,
and the young
before
man
his own
broke
wooden
through,
house,
the pressure
there was a
on them
young
was
man
lifted.
wearing a blue
They
robe
sighed
with
in
golden
relief
edges
as they looked
standing
at the
there.
people around them.
This young man
One
had a
by
tall
one,
and sturdy
people
figure,
fell from the sky.
a handsome appearance,
They finally
and a pair
broke
of
through.
tiger-like eyebrows
Soon
that
after,
emitted
another
a
young
dignified
man
aura.
broke through.
Presently,
After
he
about
was
a dozen
staring
breaths,
at Duan
there were
Lingtian
only
as he
1,000
asked
people
indifferently,
left.
"You're Duan Lingtian?" The only
At
true
this moment,
disciple of
Su
Feng
Konghai,
Qingyang,
who was supporting
the
the
heavenly
Devata
emperor
realm's
of the
battle of the
solitary
geniuses,
destructive
withdrew
heaven,
his aura and
"Is
said,
there a reason you're looking
"Congratulations
for me?"
on passing the
Duan
first round
ground of the Devata realms battle
as
of
he
the
looked at the young
geniuses.
man. At this moment, those who were not by the young man's hostility.
celestial emperors
After all, he did not know this
relief.
young man at all.
Joy could be seen on their faces.
The fourth true disciple of the heavenly emperor of the Xian Yuan heaven. I'm here with my master to participate in the Devata realms battle of the geniuses. Most of the young geniuses who had come to participate in the Devata realms battle of the geniuses were already mentally prepared to face the celestial emperor true disciple, the legendary heavenly emperor from the solitary destructive heaven. They were here to serve as even my master for the young geniuses who had the strength of a titled celestial emperor. Duan Lingtian naturally, the young many of them were here to seek a breakthrough. Although the young man's tone was calm, they had heard that many changes in the young man's emotions during the Devata Devata realms
only
battle of the
slightly over
geniuses in the
700
past.
years old.
Although they
I'm
did
not
not
much
receive
older than
any
you, so I'm
substantial
not taking
rewards in the
advantage
end,
of you.
being able to
Tong
break
Tu
through was
continued to
already
say,
the best reward
at
they
this
could
moment,
get. The
for this
onlookers
reason,
were in an
they
uproar.
could not help but feel
I was
envious
wondering
when they
who
saw
dared to
Wang
provoke
Ting
Duan
and the other
Lingtian.
two young
As
geniuses
it turns
who had
out,
the strength
it's the
of a
true
titled
disciple of the
celestial
heavenly
realm.
emperor of the
I
Xian
thought
Yuan
I'd
heaven.
be able to break through.
I know Tong Tuesday.
In the end, I was
He's
so
the
close to breaking
disciple
through.
of the heavenly
Me
emperor
too.
of the Xian
I
Yuan
was so
heaven.
close to breaking
His
through,
cultivation
but I
base
didn't
was
make
close
it.
to becoming
These
a titled
three young
celestial
geniuses
emperor
are really
a few
lucky.
decades ago.
They managed to
Now
break
that he's
through at
over
the most
700
critical
years
moment and
old,
possess
it's
strength
likely that he's
comparable to
already
a
a
titled celestial emperor.
If they didn't participate
Even if he
in the
hasn't
Devata
become a
realms
titled
battle of the
celestial emperor
geniuses
yet,
it would
I'm
be
sure he
extremely
won't be a
difficult
match
for
for
them to
anyone
break
below
through
the
before they
level of a
reach the
titled
age of
celestial
1000.
emperor.
Speaking
Many
of which,
people who had been
the heavenly
eliminated
emperor
and
of
those who
Xian
had the
Yuan
strength
heaven
of a
is
titled
also a
celestial
remarkable
emperor who
figure.
had the strength of a
Most
titled
importantly,
celestial
he's
emperor
also
could
a
not help
powerful
but sigh.
sword celestial.
Some people
For
looked
this
at Wang
reason,
Ting
after
and the
the
other
rise
two
of the
young
heavenly
geniuses
emperor of the
enviously.
solitary destructive
So what
heaven,
if they've broken
Feng
through?
Qingyang, since
Many
they passed
people
the first
compared the
round,
two of them
even
to
if they
each other.
passed the second
It's
round,
said that both
there's
of them
still a
had
chance
sparred
they'll be
before,
eliminated
and their
in the
strengths
third
were on
round.
par. At most,
That's all
they'll
in the
make it
past.
to the fourth round.
Ever since the
Naturally,
legendary heavenly
these people were
emperor
jealous
of
of
the solitary
Wang
destructive
Ting and the
heaven
other
came out of the
three young
Azura
geniuses.
hell, one of
Not
the
many
seven
people paid
deadliest
them any
places in the
attention.
Devata realms.
If they were given a
His
choice,
strength has
they would
already
still
surpassed
choose
the
to break
heavenly
through or
emperor
not.
of the Xian
They were
Yuan heaven.
merely jealous of Wang
Perhaps
Ting and the
the
other
true
two young
disciple of the
geniuses.
heavenly emperor of the
I
Xian
hereby
Yuan
announce
heaven
the
isn't
end of the
convinced
first
of his
round of the
master
Devata
strength.
realms battle
That's
of the
why he
geniuses.
challenged the
At
true
this moment,
disciple of the
Su
heavenly
Konghai,
emperor of
one
the
of the
solitary
vice
destructive
masters of
heaven,
the
to
main
prove
hall
that
of
his
the
master's
temple,
disciple
announced
is stronger.
loudly. Now,
Isn't he
the
bullying
1,000
us?
people who
Even
passed
if
the
he's
first
not much
round will
older
have
than
2
Duan
hours to
Lingtian.
rest. When did he
After
become a
that,
disciple
the
of the
second round
heavenly
will
emperor
begin.
of the Xian Yuan
As
heaven?
soon as Su
And when did
Konghai
Duan
finished
Lingtian
speaking,
become a
the crowd
disciple of
returned
the
to their
heavenly
seats one
emperor
after
of the
another.
solitary
None
destructive
of them
heaven?
were worried that they would be
Based
mixed
on what
up
I
with
know,
those who had been
Tong Tu
eliminated,
has been in the
because
heavenly
those who were
palace of the
eliminated
Xian Yuan
absolutely
heaven since
didn't
he
have
was
the
young.
guts to
As
participate
for
in the
Duan
second round of
Lingtian, he
selection
only met
after
the
the
first
first round.
emperor of the
This
solitary
kind of small
destructive
method
heaven,
of fishing in troubled
Qingyang,
waters
would
about
only
100
cause the
years
lucky
ago.
ones to
The
lose their
onlookers
lives.
whispered among
In the
themselves.
history of the
They
Devata
did not
realms
think
battle
Tong
of the
Tu was
geniuses,
taking advantage
there
of
were
Duan
always people
Lingtian
who
by
tried to
challenging
take
Duan
advantage of the
Lingtian just
situation.
because the age gap
However,
between them was
all of
not
them were
big.
killed by the
What a
people
joke.
from the title
Tong
temple
Tu
who were in
had been
charge of
cultivating
the
with the
Devata
heavenly
realms battle
emperor
of the
Xian Yuan
geniuses.
heaven since
Even
he was
the
young.
disciples of heavenly emperors
Duan
were killed.
Lingtian, on the
If
other
anyone
hand,
tried
had
to take
only met the
advantage of the
heavenly
situation,
emperor of the
the title
solitary
temple would
destructive
view it
heaven
as
when
a
he was
challenge to its
500 years
authority.
old.
Furthermore,
Tong
it
Tu
would
be
be
so
only
shameless
1,000
as
people,
to say
so
he
it was
was
not
easy to
taking
remember
advantage
them?
of Duan Lingtian.
Even if an ordinary
Duan
person
Lingtian
wanted
won't
to,
accept the
it would be
duel,
very
right?
difficult for them to
Soon
remember
after,
1,000
more
people.
and more people shifted
However,
their attention
would
to
it be
Duan
difficult
Lingtian's
for a
reply
god
who
to
was
Tong
above the
Tuesday?
10 directions
Most of
celestial
them were
emperors
certain
to
Duan
remember
Lingtian
1,000
would not
people.
accept the duel,
Apart from
since they
that,
were certain
the
Duan
vice palace
Lingtian would be
masters of the
humiliated
title
if he
temple's
accepted the
branches
duel.
in the Devata realms
Only an
had
idiot
already
would be
recorded the
humiliated.
names of the young
Duan
geniuses who
Lingtian
had
had
advanced
good
to the
reason for
Devata
not
realms.
accepting the duel.
Even the names
There was
of
no
the young
need for him
geniuses
to worry
from the
about
heavenly
embarrassing
emperor's
his
palace in the
master.
Devata
The
realms
legendary
had been
heavenly
recorded in
emperor
the
of the
title
solitary
temple's branches.
destructive heaven.
Duan Lingtian, don't tell
For
me
example,
you don't have the guts
before
to
the
accept
Devata
the duel.
realms battle of the
With Tong
geniuses,
Tu's hearing,
the vice
it was
palace
only
masters
natural
of the
that he
title
heard the
temple's
whispers
branch
around
in
him.
the solitary
He
destructive
frowned.
heaven had
Aren't
gone to
these
look for
fellows
Meng
looking for
Luo
an
and
excuse
asked
for
for
their
Duan
information so that they
Lingtian
could
by saying
keep
that
tabs on the names of
Duan
Lingtian? Although I grew up in the heavenly palace
and
of the
Wang Ting.
heavenly palace
Currently,
of the Xian
the
Yuan
vice
heaven,
palace
I only
masters of the
started
title
cultivating
temple's
under my
branch in the
master when I was
solitary
300
destructive
years
heaven
old.
had recorded the names
Tong
of the
Tu
young
looked at Duan
geniuses who had
Lingtian
advanced
and said
to the Devata
indifferently,
realms.
"If you think I'm
Including
taking
the
advantage
4
of you,
people from the
we can have
heavenly
a duel.
emperor
Palace. I
We
won't
have a
use my
total of
celestial
23
weapon."
people from the
A commotion
solitary
broke out
destructive
as
heaven.
soon as
as Tong
Currently,
Tu finished speaking.
13 of them have
Before
advanced
Duan
to the
Ling
Devata
Tian could
realms.
reply,
The
"That's
onlookers
not bad."
began to whisper
the vice
among
palace
themselves
master
again.
of the Title
Tong
Temple's
Tu
branch
said
in
he
the
won't
solitary
use his
destructive
celestial
heaven
weapon?
said with a smile.
Isn't he a little
The
too
vice
arrogant?
palace master
Isn't
nodded.
he underestimating
Yes,
his opponent?
that's not bad. Nobody
However,
expected
what
Tong
surprised
Tu
me
would
the
dare
most
to say
is
that
the
he would
true
not use
disciple
his
of the
celestial
heavenly
weapon in a
emperor of
duel
the
with
solitary
Duan
destructive
Ling.
heaven.
Upon
Earlier,
hearing
when
Tong
he
Tu's
faced the
words,
fifth wave
the
of
onlookers
pressure
began to
from Vice
realize
Palace
something.
Master Su,
Tong
he
Tu was
remained
most
calm.
likely a
He
titled
doesn't seem
celestial
like an
emperor
ordinary
now.
titled
Duan Ling
celestial
could
emperor.
not help but laugh
Upon
when he
hearing
heard
the
Tong
Vice
Tu's
Palace
words.
Master's words, what are
The
you
Vice
laughing
Palace
at?
Master's
Tong
expression
Tu's
turned solemn.
darkened. It seems like the
Are
true
you trying to
disciple
hide
of the
your
heavenly
guilt and
emperor
cowardice
Feng
by
Qingyang
laughing?
is at least a
I've
two-star
already
god
made
of
such a
war.
concession.
How
And
shocking!
yet, you're
He's
still
only
afraid to duel
slightly
with
over
me?
600 years old.
You're a
but he's
disgrace
already
to your
a
master,
two-star god of war.
Feng Qingyang.
Upon hearing
At the end
Vice
of his
Palace
sentence,
Master's words,
Tong Tu
the Vice
snorted
Palace
coldly
Master
and said
turned to look at the
disdainfully,
young man standing
"Do you
next
really
to
want to
Duan
duel with
Lingtian.
me?"
That young
Lingtian
man's
asked
name
as he
is
looked
Su
at
Li
Tong
from the
Tu
Jade
in
Emperor
differently.
Heaven.
He's
He's about
about
the
the same
same
age
age
as
in front
Duan
of so many
Lingtian.
people.
He's at least a two-star god of war. As soon as both of them's words left his mouth, geniuses in the Devata narrowed his battle of the geniuses. In the next instant, he vanished into thin air in the blink of an eye. Bang. It did not take long for the 2 hours to pass by. A loud noise resonated in their young geniuses who had been exhausted in the first round. They discovered Duan Ling had appeared at the spot where Tong Tu was standing earlier. What they had just experienced was not a battle of life and arrow that had left its bow. They had only consumed a certain amount of celestial core power and some mental energy. He was in a wretched state. If they wanted to recover, he could not help but throw up a mouthful of blood. He only managed to regain his balance after flying for 100 meters for more than half an hour after they had recovered. His expression was unsightly as he glared at Duan Ling will now enter the arena. As soon as Su Konghai, the true disciple of the heavenly of the main hall of the title destructive heaven, was in charge of the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses, before Duan Ling could reply, the 1,000 young geniuses who had survived until the end of the first round the Devata realm's battle in the middle of the spectator area. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. No more, the onlookers were stunned by As soon as they entered the arena, Su Konghai raised his hand and sent a wave of energy into the vast arena. See that Duan Ling strength was not inferior to Tong Tuesday. A translucent beam of light rose into the air before a white light shrouded the arena. How could he injure Tong Tu? At the same time, the light shrouded Duan Ling and the others as well had noticed this as well. That was why he had left in a hurry. Due to the large size of the arena, it did not seem crowded. He would not be able to defeat Duan Ling to enter the arena, let alone Tong Tu, who had been injured by Duan Ling's voice rang due to his carelessness. I'm sure most of you know the rules of the second round of the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. If you were in his place, I'll repeat it now. Among the crowd of young geniuses, without discrimination, one of them asked softly, 700 people will be eliminated, shook their heads when they heard this question. When 300 people are left. I'm almost certain the true disciple of the legendary heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven is a title out of the formation's light shield. Another 600-year-old titled Celestial raised his hand, and 1,000 jade tokens he had a good master and that he was just a celestial maiden scattering flowers. Why do I suddenly feel like my face is burning towards the group of young geniuses, including Duan Ling? Like I said, on the other legendary genius of the solitary destructive heaven held onto their jade tokens in their hands. So many peerless geniuses wanted to be his saving treasures, but he didn't accept them. Although the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses was not a battle of life and death, it was not unusual for one to kill the young geniuses. Brother, can you not embarrass me? You'll be eliminated when Duan if you crush your jade token around and return to the wooden house. You'll also be eliminated if you leave the area covered by the formation's light shield on your own. Was a titled celestial emperor. You'll also be eliminated if you're eliminated. Similar to Su Li from the Jade Emperor Heaven. For a time, Duan was a titled and the others glanced at the formation light shield to determine the specific gap between them so that they would not accidentally create their own formation light shield during the battle and be eliminated miserably. The fourth true disciple of the heavenly emperor of the Xianyuan heaven won't be able to return to his wooden house after he was severely injured. Many people began to complain. He went to look for his third senior brother, for everyone. The most outstanding person even among the young geniuses from the heavenly palace of the Xianyuan differently. Yudong Fong. You have 15 minutes to prepare. Was more than 900 years old. His voice rang again. He was known as a three-star god of war in the Nine Serenities battlefield. After 15 minutes, currently, I'll announce many people suspected he was at least a 4-star god of war. You'll be able to eliminate the other third senior brother. As soon as Su Konghai finished speaking, the true disciple of the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Some of them knew each other, and some of them did not know each other, and they began to look for someone to work with so they would not be eliminated in the second round. Fong was a young man in a black and gray robe. No matter how high the price is, he had a medium build and was half a head shorter than Tong Tuesday. Even if I'll be eliminated in the third round, the cold aura he exuded was superior to Tong Tu said through gritted teeth. He had an ordinary face, I'll find someone whose eyes seemed to be glowing to help me pass the second round, making it easy for people to be attracted round and enter the third round. Attacked me. I'll be able to boast to everyone that I've advanced to the third round of the Devata realms. Since he managed to injure you so severely, being eliminated in the second round and being eliminated in the third round are two completely different things. Let me quite ask you this. People had similar thoughts. If he's not as strong as a titled celestial emperor, can he injure you even if he sneak attacked the third round? Although these people were willing to pay the price, none of them came looking for Duan Ling Tian. He was naturally aware of this, could not help but it was exactly because of this that he was unwilling to accept this. Put aside the question of whether he would agree to work with them, these people should at least ask him. If Yu Dongfang was stronger than him, he would not mind admitting true disciple of the heavenly emperor of the Xianyuan heaven, if Yu Dongfang had been defeated by strong as him, it would be embarrassing for him to be injured by Yu Dongfang's to ask if he was willing to work with them. Yu Dongfang shook his head as he said, of the people who came to look for Tong 600 years after Tong and his strength is on par with yours. Moreover, he was certain Yu Dongfang would help disciple of heavenly emperor Feng Qingyang only met Feng Qingyang for the first time 100 years ago and cultivated under heavenly head with a wry smile on his face. Yu Dongfang shook his head as he spoke. He could see those who were weaker than titled celestial emperors did not approach them even though they were all titled celestial emperors. It was as though they would be in danger if they followed them. News of Duan Lingtian injuring to ask Ling Jueyun, the fourth true disciple of the heavenly emperor of the Xianyuan heaven. He had come here with just a single move spread like wildfire, so he was aware of young geniuses from the various Devata realms after Ling Jueyun rejected the young prodigy's offer. Even the high-ranking officials from the title temple's branches and the heavenly emperors and the other various Devata realms the second round of the Devata realms if it was an ordinary person, it would not have attracted so much attention. Voice arrived as scheduled. The main character of this matter was Duan Lingtian, the only true disciple of the legendary heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, Feng Qingyang. The second round of the Devata realms curious about Duan Lingtian's talent and ability to gain the favor of the legendary heavenly emperor of the young geniuses present on the scene had tensed up and looked at the people around them with officials from the title temple and the heavenly palaces in the Devata realms were curious as to why the legendary heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven would suddenly accept a disciple who was unknown to them. Apart from the people from the heavenly palace of the solitary destruction on their faces, the heavenly emperor of the boundless heaven was not surprised. The scene immediately turned chaotic. Heaven was the Devata realm where the heavenly entire place in just a blink of an eye was located. The battle royale, the heavenly emperor of the boundless heaven, was the grandfather and his group stood at a corner of the arena. Master of the heavenly did not make the first move as though they were not part of the heavenly emperor of the boundless heaven. Battles was as strong as a titled celestial emperor. People crushed their jade tokens in the nick of time and were sent out of the emperor of the heavenly in less than a dozen breaths had suffered a loss more than 20 people had already given up. After learning that Duan Lingtian was the true disciple of Feng Qingyang to give up. The heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven to react. The heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. He had learned in the beginning only one person had died. It's normal. After a few more people died. The heavenly emperor of the boundless heaven thought it was normal for Duan Lingtian no one dared to be careless or greedy caught off guard. When they felt something was amiss, the others did not immediately crushed their heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. Circumstances, the number would either not accept a disciple or accept someone's a monster as his disciple. Zhang Tianyu, who was standing behind Duan Lingtian, most likely did not as he looked to the right in front of him with the talent and comprehension of Feng Qingyang and Wang Ting did not say anything to the guidance and nurturing when they saw the two of them following Duan Lingtian, he would definitely be the second did not say anything. In fact, he might even surpass his master. At the same time, Duan Lingtian was unaware of all this. Both of them were constantly on guard while waiting for Ling Jueyun's arrival. Zhang Tianyu immediately warned them. Only just stepped out of the wooden house when he received a message from Ling Jueyun. People flew towards Duan Lingtian once again. Ling Jueyun in the lead was the person who had just killed one person. His appearance hadn't changed much. His ability was not as simple as his brows was clearly more mature. He was at least a two-star war god, the experience of the past few hundred years had changed him a lot. Of the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven asked curiously, if I can eliminate Ling Jueyun back to his wooden house, I'll be able to brag about it for the rest of my life. From Ling Jueyun, the leader was an ordinary-looking young man with where Ling Jueyun came from. He was surrounded by lightning, as if he was a god of thunder and lightning bathed in heaven a long time ago. He came with a vast amount of lightning. Devata realm I came from, I came from Feng Qingtian's His momentum was mighty and intimidating. Replied. From his Did you words, come with the people it was obvious that he wanted to eliminate Duan Lingtian. The other six people standing behind him were all with young prodigies talent and comprehension. It would not be difficult for him to enter Feng Qingtian's. Two of them exuded the aura and become a disciple of Feng Qingtian, which was enough to prove that they were not weak. Shook his head. The disciple of the heavenly emperor is only slightly over 600 years old to qualify for the Devata strong battle of titled celestial emperor. You know who I am. Today I, Lin Wei, shall witness your strengths. The young man who called
I have
himself
no
Lin Wei
intention of
raised his
becoming a
hand
disciple
and brought out
in the
a gigantic
realms.
hammer that was
Ever
surrounded
since
by
I was
lightning
young,
bolts.
I've always
The
been
hammer
surrounded
seemed to
by
carry an
God-level
unparalleled
powerhouses.
divine might,
Even
as
the
its
servants in my
toured
clan
Duan
are
Ling Tian
God-level
and the
powerhouses.
others. As the
Do you
hammer
think it's
fell,
possible for
heaven
me
and
to
earth
become a
changed
disciple
color.
of someone
It
from the
seemed as
Devata
though it
realms?
could destroy everything.
Even the heavenly
At the
emperors
same
of Devata
time,
realms
Duan
might
Ling
not be
Tian
qualified
discovered
to be
that
my
the young
master,
man's
let
profundities
alone
were
a
glowing
heavenly
even
emperor
more
who has
brightly
not
than
attained
before.
godhood.
At this moment,
Ling
Duan
Jueyun
Ling
said
Tian
haughtily,
could tell that the
as
young
the
man's
young
prodigy
master of
was
the Ling
not
clan,
weak at all.
one of the most
At the
powerful
very
clans
least,
in the
the
divine
young man
offering
was
land,
one of the
Ling
strongest
Jueyun
among the
had his own
two-star war
pride.
gods.
Apart
Most
from his
likely,
own pride,
he was the
his
strongest
clan's pride
among the
made it
7 people
impossible for
standing
him to
before
become
him.
a disciple of someone from the Ling clan. Even if his
Based on
clan
this,
had been
it was
annihilated,
obvious the
his
young
clan
man
was
wanted
not.
to make a name for
However,
himself
they
by
arrived
eliminating
before
Duan
me.
Ling Tian
I told
in the
them I'd
second
come by
round.
myself.
At this moment,
Even if
when I
Duan Ling
arrived,
Tian's
the
heart was
vice
like
palace
an ancient
masters
well
of
without
Feng
ripples.
Qingtian's title
The
temple
corners
and
of
a
their
direct
mouth couldn't
disciple
help
of
but
the
curl
heavenly
into
emperor
a
of the
helpless
primeval
arc.
heaven came
When
to
did
pick me
I,
up.
Duan
Ling
Ling
Jueyun
Tian,
said,
become a
"It
soft
seems like you're
persimmon
quite
in the
strong."
eyes of others? Even the vice palace
Before
masters
Lin
of
Wei
Feng
could get close
Qingtian's
to
title
Duan Ling
temple are
Tian,
willing to give
Ling
you
Jueyun,
face.
who was standing next
Duan
to
Ling
Duan
Tian
Ling
was
Tian,
surprised.
scoffed.
How could they
Then,
not give me
his
face?
eyes turned cold
Ling
as another
Jueyun
Ling
smiled
Jueyun
faintly.
appeared in his body.
Including me,
This
there
was
are
the law
17
of
people
death's
from
death
Feng
clone
Qingtian's
profundity.
title temple
The other
who
Ling
passed the
Jueyun's
test to
eyes were
participate
crimson
in the
red.
Devata realms
As soon as he
battle
flew
of
out of his
geniuses.
body, he
To be
shot
honest,
toward Lin Wei
even if they
and the
join
others
forces,
like a blood-red
I'm confident
meteor
I can
in the
kill
night
all
sky.
of them.
A
At most,
terrifying
I'll only
murderous
be
aura
injured.
surged out of his
Ling
body as
Jueyun's
Yun's
tone
tone
was
was
filled
Lin
with
Wei
pride
and the
again.
others.
You're not
You're
humble at
seeking
all.
death.
Duan
Lin
Ling
Wei
Tian
sneered.
shook his head. His target
Duan
was
Ling
Duan Ling
Tian, you're
Tian.
doing well as well.
No matter who it was,
Ling
he would
Jueyun said with a
mercilessly
smile.
destroy
On my
anyone
way
who
here,
stood in
I
his
heard
way.
Wei Qi.
So
The
what if
vice
you have a
palace
death
masters
clone?
of Feng
I can
Qingtian's
crush you
title
with a
temple
single
and
strike
Wei
of my
Qi,
hammer.
the true
The
disciple of the
gigantic
heavenly
hammer
emperor
in
of the
Lin Wei's
primeval
hand
heaven
seemed to have
talking about
transformed
you.
into a
They
meteor
said
as
you're
it
at least
fell
a
on
titled
Ling
celestial
Jueyun's death
emperor.
clone profundity.
However,
Their estimation of your strength
flashed
is
in
too
the
low,
air
as though it was
since
a
I've
punishment
achieved
from the
so
9
much,
heavens.
even if you're not as strong as
Rumble.
me, you shouldn't be that
The
much
gigantic
weaker than
hammer
me.
was extremely
Ling Jueyun
fast.
smiled brightly.
As it flew through
Not
the
as
air,
strong as
the
you?
air around it
Upon
exploded
hearing
like
Ling
thunder.
Jueyun's words,
Just as
Duan
the
Ling
gigantic
Tian
hammer
looked
was
at him
about to
meaningfully.
land on Ling
It seems
Jueyun's
like
death
you're
clone
really
profundity,
confident in your
Ling
strength.
Jueyun's
In
death
that
clone
case,
profundity
do you want to
suddenly
find a
surged.
place to spar
Then,
with me?
its speed more
If
than
it was 2
doubled,
weeks
and
ago,
it easily
I would
dodged
have
the
agreed to
gigantic
your
hammer.
request.
Like a
However,
ghost,
I've
I've
recently
recently
gained some
closed in on
insights
Lin
that I
Wei,
need time
who
to
had just
digest
regained
before
his
the
senses.
Devata realms
With
battle
one hand
of the
on Lin
geniuses
Wei's head
begins.
and the other
Ling
on Lin
Jueyun
Wei's
shook his
shoulder,
head
the
and
death
said,
clone
"If you want to
profundity's
spar
eyes
with me,
flashed
you'd
with an
better wait
extremely
until the
cold light.
Devata realms battle
No,
of the
just
geniuses
as Lin
begins."
Wei let out a shrill
Moreover,
scream of
I
terror,
heard the Devata
a jade
realms
tablet
battle of
appeared
the
in his
geniuses
hand,
will begin
and he was
in
about to
6
crush it.
months.
Rip.
Duan
The
Ling
sound of
Tian
something
had
being
learned
torn
about this
apart
from his
rang out.
master,
It was Ling
Qingyang,
Jueyun's
so he
death
was not
clone
surprised by
profundity
Ling
tearing Lin
Jueyun's
Wei's
words.
body apart with its
You should
bare
return
hands.
to the Devata
In an
realms
instant,
battle
his
of the
head was
geniuses.
separated from
I'll
his
spar
body.
with you again.
Blood splattered
Duan Ling
everywhere,
Tian said with a
dazzling to
smile.
the eye. At this moment,
There's no
even
rush.
the people who were fighting
Ling
in the
Jueyun took a
vicinity
deep
were
breath
shocked
and
by the
said,
commotion.
"Duan Ling, then
They stopped
I'd like
fighting
to meet
and
Sister
looked at
Huang."
Ling Jueyun warily.
Upon hearing Ling
Sir,
Jueyun's
we won't
words,
fight with you
Duan Ling
anymore.
Tian could
Believe
not
now.
help but smile
When
wryly.
the 6 people
"Do you
behind
really
Lin
want to
Wei
meet
saw
her?
that the
You'll
strongest
be
among
disappointed."
them, Lin Wei,
I'm
was
relieved
torn
to
in
hear
half.
that.
They were
A rare
naturally
smile
terrified.
appeared on Ling
After
Jueyun's
hurriedly
cold
opening
face.
their mouths,
It
they
seems
wanted
like
to
Sister
shift the
Huang
target elsewhere.
or has completely
However,
merged with your
Ling
divine
Jueyun
artifact.
ignored them. As a
His
native of
death
the realms
clone
of
profundity
gods,
closed
Ling
in on them
Jueyun,
again.
naturally,
2
knew
more
what would
ripping
happen
sounds
when the
rang in
soul
the
of
air
another
as 2
divine
more
artifact
people were torn
merged with
apart.
another person's
Blood
divine
and flesh
artifact.
splattered all
In
over
the
the
end,
place.
Duan Ling
The
Tian
remaining
asked
4 people's
Huang
expressions
to meet Ling
changed
Jueyun.
drastically when they
Sister
saw
Huang,
this.
I know I don't mean much to you, but
But I want to tell you that I didn't take any chances. All these years, I didn't slack off pendants they had taken out earlier and looked at Huang. Naturally, not before they left, cold their faces were filled with reluctance. Also filled with emotions. After all, they were all titled in response to his heartfelt words, and yet they were forced to only respond with a faint "oh." However, when they found about their three temporary partners who were killed, they were relieved that Ling Jiwei did not attack them first. Otherwise, they would have been killed instead of the other two. Your former master is his sister. They looked at the gray-clad young man standing next to Duan Lingtian, the only true disciple of Feng Qingyang. I know what you mean. The heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. But right now, their eyes were filled with fear when they looked at the gray-clad young man standing next to Duan Lingtian. I have memories of what you said. I didn't expect Duan Lingtian to have such a powerful person by his side. Even
Based
if
on the
those
strength he
memories are
displayed
my own,
earlier,
he's at
right
least
now,
a 3-star
I only
god
know
of
that
war.
you are my master.
Ling Jueyun could be said to be the most powerful person
Even
among
if I
those who
turn
had
into
fought
ashes,
so far.
I will have
Naturally,
no regrets.
there were other
As for the
4-star
rest,
gods
whether
of
it is
war and
people or
5-star
things,
gods of war as
they
well.
are not important.
However, most
Wang
of them
said,
held back when they
this
attacked.
was the fate of a
Unlike
divine
Duan
artifact
Ling
soul.
Tian, Duan Ling
Alright,
Tian had killed
although
3
Duan
young
Ling
prodigies
Tian
who were
felt a
titled
little
celestial
helpless,
emperors
he knew
as
this
soon as
wasn't
he attacked.
something he could control.
This did not seem
Of
like an
course,
ordinary
he could order
battle.
Huang
It
or
seemed
treat
more
Ling
like a
Jueyun
battle
better,
between
but
enemies.
even so, her
He's
emotions
so
were still
powerful.
stiff and would only
Zhang
have the opposite
Tianyu
effect.
and Wang Ting, who were
Let's go
standing
back
behind
on.
Ling Jueyun,
After sending
felt
chills
Huang
running
back.
up their spines when they saw Ling Jueyun formation disc his master Feng Qingyang had given him and activated it with immortal crystals.
They looked at Ling Jueyun warily.
Then he opened the small
Ling
world
Tian's
in his
friend?
body to communicate with his family.
He's at least a 3-star god
After
of
his
war,
master's
right?
reminder last
It's
time,
impossible
he
for an
closed
ordinary
the small
3-star
world in
god
his
of
body.
war to possess
At the same
such
time,
strength.
her master had
Apart from
also
Duan
given
Ling
her a
Tian
squared
and
disc
Suli,
array.
who had heard about
Inside
Ling
it was a
Jueyun's
very
strength from
ingenious
Duan
array
Ling
that
Tian's
could
words.
conceal one's
Everyone
aura.
who had been paying
Even
attention
if a
to
divine
Ling
spirit
Jueyun's
realm
battle
master
instinctively
powerful divine
turned to look
sense
at him.
could pass through the array.
Who's he? He would still
I've
be
never
able
heard
to
of
sense
him.
something before
His
passing
mastery
through
of
the
the
array.
law of death
That
is
little bit of
profound.
time was enough for him to
His
close
law
the
of
small
war is
world in his
extraordinary,
body. And he's
Therefore,
decisive
with
in
the
killing.
formation disc,
It's fine
he
if
did
he's
not have
only
to
a
worry about the
3-star god of
secret of
war
his small
or a
world
4-star
being
god of war.
discovered.
However,
At
if
this
he's
moment,
a 5-star
most
god
of his
war,
family
he
members
might be able to
in
kill a
Duan Ling Tian's
3-star
little
god
world
of war
were
or a
cultivating.
4-star god
Only
of war.
his father and mother
Many
had
people
stopped
thought Ling
cultivating
Jueyun
and
was
were
a
chatting.
bloodthirsty person.
After chatting with his parents
Otherwise,
for a while,
why would he
Duan
not give
Ling
others a
Tian
chance to
closed
kill him?
the small world in his
Naturally,
body again.
those who were killed
At the
in
same
such a
time,
situation
he
could
began to
only
wait
blame
for the
themselves
Devata
for being
realm's battle
unlucky.
of the geniuses
After
to
all,
begin
everyone
in
knew
half
the
a year.
rules.
Naturally,
If they knew they were
Duan
no
Ling
match
Tian
for
did
Duan
not
Ling
plan to
Tian,
slack
they
off
should
in the
leave as
remaining
soon as
half a year.
possible.
He
Naturally,
continued to deepen
the
his
heavenly
understanding
emperors
of the
from the
sword
various
Dao that his
Devata
master
realms
Feng
merely
Qingyang had
glanced
taught
at
him
Ling
by
Jueyun
fusing the
before they looked
profundity
away.
of the law of
Based
space
on Ling
into it.
Jueyun's current
Due
strength,
to the supreme
they did not pay
powerhouse
much
divinity
attention
in
to
his
him.
possession.
Moreover,
Duan Ling
many
Tian
heavenly
made progress
emperors were
almost
disgusted
every
by
day.
Ling Jueyun's
In just half a
ruthlessness.
month, he had
In
made
the arena,
significant progress.
the number of people who
Time
were
continued
eliminated
to
and
pass
those who would be
quietly.
killed added
Half a
up
year
to more than
passed
200
in just a
people.
blink of an eye.
There were only
The
about
Devata
700
realm's
people
battle
left,
of the geniuses
and the
was
battle
about
was still
to begin.
going on.
In
However,
the literature
after
hall,
Ling Jueyun's ruthless act, no one dared to provoke Duan Ling
Chapter
Tian and the others anymore.
3453.
They
The
only
Devata
cared about
realm's
killing
battle
each
of
other,
the geniuses
treating
was held
Duan Ling
every
Tian and the
1,000
others
years
as
in
though
the
they were
heavenly
invisible.
palaces of the
In
various
fact,
Devata realms.
some of them even brushed past Duan
it was
Ling
the
Tian
heavenly
and the
palace
others
of
as
the
they
primeval
fought.
heavens turned to host the battle of the geniuses.
When the
Since
sound
the
of a
heavenly
sharp
palace
weapon
of the
piercing
primeval
flesh
heaven
rang
would
in the
host
air,
the battle
a
of the
young man
geniuses
dressed
every
in blood-red
81,000
robes who
years.
wielded a saber
The heavenly
made his
palace
move.
of the
The
primeval
young man
heaven
had
had
a
prepared a
medium
venue
build
for
and
the
a
battle
cold
of the
expression on
geniuses.
his face.
However,
His eyes
the venue
were filled
was
with
usually
killing
sealed
intent.
off by a formation
Upon closer
and would only
inspection,
be opened
one
when the
could see
battle
his
of the
robes
geniuses
were not
began.
blood red.
The venue
Instead,
had a history
they were dark
similar
gray.
to the battle of the
Due to the
geniuses in the
excessive amount
Devata
of blood,
realms. His robes were dyed red. The heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven was different from the current heavenly
this was
emperor
because
of the
he did
primeval
not
heaven.
intentionally
This
avoid
venue
the blood
is quite
that
big.
spurted out from the
The
bodies
people
of
from
the
the
people
heavenly
he killed.
palace of the
It was as
primeval
though he
heaven arranged for the
intentionally
young
allowed the blood
geniuses
to
from
stain
the
his
various
robes as a
Devata
badge of
realms,
honor for
including
killing
Duan
geniuses.
Ling Tian, to be seated in the spectator seats. There were so many seats that even after the young geniuses from the various Devata
Ling
realms had
Jueyun
taken
and
their
the
red-clad
there
young
was
man's
still a
ferocious
large empty
actions had
space.
frightened the other
At the
geniuses.
back of the auditorium,
As soon as
there
they
was a
sensed
small
danger,
floating
they
island
hurriedly
with some
crushed their
tables
jade
and
tokens.
chairs.
In
As
front
long
of
as
the
the
table
situation
stood a
wasn't
delicate
right,
and
they would
beautiful
crush
maid
their jade
holding
tokens
a
and
teapot
leave.
in her hand and
Being
teacups on the
eliminated
table.
was better than
The
dying.
seats on the floating
Most of the
islands
young
must be
geniuses
provided by the
present on the
heavenly
scene were
palace
elites
of the
in their
primeval
respective
heaven to the
regions.
high-ranking
Although
officials
the
of the
Devata
heavenly
realms
palaces
battle
and
of
the
the
geniuses would
temples
make them
branches
famous
in the Devata
they would
realms.
still be famous
It was
in
not
their
difficult
respective
for the
regions.
young geniuses
We can't
present on
afford
the
to
scene
offend them.
figure this out.
I'll take my leave
Although
first.
most of the young geniuses
It's
had
too
arrived.
dangerous.
The higher-ranking
I'll wait
officials
until
from
the
the
heavenly
heavenly
palaces
palaces
and
and
the
the
title
anyone I can
temples
defeat
branches
had
Are
yet
you
to
shameless?
Duan
3
Ling
against
Tian,
1?
Su
All
Li,
right, I'll take
and
my
Ling
leave
Ju Yun
first.
sat together.
If any one
At
of you
this
makes
moment,
it to the third
Su Li
round,
and Ling
I'll
Ju
challenge
Yun
that
had
person
gotten
to
to
know
a
each
duel
other.
and defeat him
Both of
or
them were
even
straightforward
people, so it did not
regardless
take
of
long
whether
for
they
them
were
to get
young
along.
geniuses with
The other
limited
3
strength
young
or
geniuses
titles
from the
the
Heavenly
heavenly
Palace
powers of the
all of them
solitary
crushed their
destructive
jade
heaven,
tokens
Zhang
and left.
Tianyu,
However,
Wang Ting,
due
and
to
He
Ling Ju
Jinny
Yun
sat
and the
behind
red-clad
Duan
young
Ling
man's
Tian.
actions, The second round of the Devata realms battle of the geniuses ended in less than 4 hours. For the first time, 300 people emerged from the second round of the Devata realms battle of the geniuses in the Devata realms. Among the 300 people to express disdain for them were young geniuses. Even the fact that comparable to titles only 600 years old was spread by them. Were 2-star gods of war. It could be said that it was the 3 of them who caused the group of young geniuses to think that paid a hefty price for other young geniuses to help them pass the second round. When Tong Tu, although these people's true disciple of the heavenly emperor of titled celestial emperor, to challenge Duan Ling Tian and was severely injured by Duan Ling Tian. Even young geniuses who were stronger than them were tempted by the things they offered. Was only 600 years old. These people knew they were only able to pass the second round because they were protected by other people. If he was titled, they were destined to be eliminated in the third round. Titled celestial emperor. After the third round, he knows the top 300 participants in the Devata realms battle of geniuses would be determined. Shifted their attention to Su Li, who was sitting next to battle of the geniuses. They had heard about Su Li, who was only 600 years old and was already a titled celestial palace master of the title temple. They had said in a clear voice, the highest potential among the group of young geniuses who participated in the battle of the geniuses. Made it to the next round and announced when they saw Duan Ling Tian's the list is announced was on par with 700 people who were eliminated today can spend some time to learn more about many of the young geniuses who made it to the next round. Turn to look at Duan Ling Tian. You can choose your opponent to challenge in a month. It's Duan Ling Tian, your challenge the only true disciple of the legendary heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. In the second round, and Su Li, the 700 people who were eliminated had a chance to revive. They know each other. In the third round, I'm afraid they don't just know each other. Succeeded in challenging their familiarity. 300 people who advanced today and successfully defeated the challenger. At this moment, be able to advance. Some people were sitting in groups of 3 to 5, and some were sitting surprised. The young geniuses from the various Devata realms did not sit according to which Devata realms they were 700 people who were eliminated today so that they can understand the 300 people who advanced today. To begin, Duan Ling Tian shook his head. Duan Ling Tian, who was chatting idly with Su Li, at this moment suddenly noticed a burning gaze that was looking at him from the spectating area, both of them took the initiative to express their gratitude to Duan Ling Tian. With just a glance, if it were not for Duan Ling Tian, with their strength, none other than they might not have been able to advance today. True disciple of the heavenly emperor of Xinyan, they were under a lot of pressure now. He had injured 6 months ago. There would be many people who would challenge them in a month. Looked at him. At that time, it would be difficult for them to advance to the fourth round. The young man shifted his gaze to him as well. Nodded. When he discovered that he was still a month left, the young man actually nodded and smiled at him. You'll be challenged in a month's time. His courteous appearance made people unable to feel any ill will towards him. When they heard Duan Ling Tian's words, Duan Ling Tian nodded at the young man as well. After the formation disappeared, they left the venue and returned to their rooms to cultivate. And the person it was as though they did not want to waste any time. That early one is Tong. Like the 2 of them, the fourth direct disciple who left in a hurry as well. Xinyan. Just as Duan Ling Tian was about to leave with Su Li and Ling Juyin, his master, was enlightened. Feng Qingyang at the same time, he was a little puzzled. Little Tian, I'm afraid the person beside him isn't an old friend of mine wants to see you. Tong Tu seems to be respectful in front of that person. Duan Ling Tian bade farewell not only Su Li and Ling Juyin before he left had long since discovered this. At this moment, I don't know that person. Was still as soon as Duan Ling Tian, the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven, who was sitting behind him, said, Senior Uncle That person Ding. Is also the after third direct disciple of the heavenly emperor of Duan Ling Tian looked at Wei Qi, who was standing behind Ding Fu, and his name is with a smile. Senior brother Wei Qi. It is said that Yu Dongfang's strength is at least that of a 4-star war god, or even stronger. On the other hand, Wang Ting said, looked at Duan Ling Tian when Duan Ling Tian arrived today. Junior nephew Duan, your friend is had already come over to apologize for their actions from half a year ago. But I didn't get to see it. Duan Ling Tian seems like I'll have to wait and take those matters down to see your performance. So he calmly accepted their apologies. The Devata realms battle of the geniuses would begin them in a month's time. The heavenly palace of the solitary people who were eliminated today would meant they had a close relationship with the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive was the only true disciple of Feng Qingyang. They could be considered the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. As the young master of the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven he would face on that day. Naturally, even if others were wary of him, they would send someone to test his strength, or even stronger. On the current situation, upon hearing Wang Ting's words, Duan Ling Tian was at least a 2-star god of war. Even Ding Fu, the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven, could not help but feel shocked when he heard Duan Ling Tian, who was sitting at the side with his eyes closed, 600 years old. Even a five-star god of war who was more than 900 years old would not have such strength when they were more than 600 years old. The heavenly emperor of Xinyuan star god of war who was less than 1,000 years old would be able to possess the strength of a two-star god of war when they were more than 600 years old. On the opposite side of the arena, Junior nephew Duan Lingtian and the others' performance in a month's time. He glanced at Duan Lingtian before his eyes would be standing to see the others, so he smiled at Duan Lingtian, who was sitting next to farewell to Feng Qingyang. Apart from he left with Wei Qi, who's the other person? The others also left one after another. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to look at Ling Jueyun. Although they were far apart, with Yudong Feng's eyesight, tore through the sky from afar see the battle intent in Ling Jueyun's eyes when he looked at Yudong Feng. One of them was someone Duan Lingtian had fought before. Was aware of Yudong Feng's identity. He had injured Duan Lingtian and sent him flying with a single blow. Was not an ordinary person. Although this was his first time meeting the other two at such a close distance, he knew who they were. To look at Ling Jueyun. They were none other than his expression turned solemn as he said, "The heavenly emperor of the yellow of the arch-heaven." It seems like he knows Duan Lingtian as well. The fourth true disciple of Gongsun Xinyuan asked curiously. Since his junior brother had such an expression on his face, build, so it was obvious Yudong stood next to the tall and ordinary Tong Tuesday. He came from Feng Qing. The aura he exuded made up for his lack of height. He came from gave off an otherworldly and refined after he passed the test. Heavenly Emperor Feng Tian's title temple from the law of earth are even stronger now that I've seen you the test in the title temple. As for the rest, the heavenly emperor of the heavenly emperor of the three-star god of war was a refined middle-aged man dressed in a golden dragon robe. Move from him. His face was as fair as jade, and his eyebrows were slanted to his three-star gods of war. At this moment, he was looking at Feng Qingyang and sighing emotionally. Tong Tu's voice was filled with dread as he spoke. Qingyang came out of the Azura hell, he might be one of the 7 god of deadliest places in the Devata narrowed his eyes. It was rumored that he had attained godhood. After all, there are less than 10 5-star gods of war participating in the Devata realms battle of geniuses. Tong Tu said as he shook his head. It was obvious he did not think Yudong Feng had the strength of a 5-star god of war. Just the law of earth alone was enough to suppress him. Looks like there's another opponent that I can take seriously. Gongsun Xinyuan could Feng's narrowed eyes to a standstill. There was a flash of light and waves of battle intent rose in his eyes. Feng Qingyang's looked at Duan Lingtian again. Easily suppressed him. He clenched his fists tightly as his divine energy was beyond imagination. If Duan Lingtian's strength was heavenly Emperor Xinyuan on par with him, you flatter he would challenge Duan Lingtian to an additional profundity. Humiliation. Although Duan shook his head and was defeated by gestured for Gongsun Xinyuan to take a seat. The others would not say the same thing. The two men standing behind Gongsun Xinyuan, Yudong Feng, disciple of the heavenly emperor of the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, could not even defeat a true disciple who was much younger than him as well. In Tong Tu's opinion, even if he tied with Duan Lingtian, it would be enough for him to avenge his humiliation. Surname was Gongsun. Third senior brother. Not many people addressed him as heavenly emperor on his face. In the history of the Devata realms, as heavenly emperor Xinyuan. 5-star gods of war participating in the Devata realms as his master. Feng Qingyang. In fact, there were a few occasions when there were more than slightly over 600 years old participating in the Devata realms battle of geniuses. This time, there are only 3 or 4 5-star gods of war participating in the Devata realms battle of geniuses, heavenly emperor including Ling Jueyun. Before Duan Lingtian could reply, 5-star gods of war participating in the Devata realms battle of geniuses. What do you think? Will those unknown young geniuses really be able to fill the remaining spots? Tong Tu's sentence revealed Feng Qingyang's confidence in Duan Lingtian. Junior brother, even don't underestimate the vastness of the Devata realms. Direct words. There's always someone stronger than you. Some of the reclusive experts were even as strong as his master. However, it's not impossible for those reclusive powerhouses to become forward and believe that his only true disciple. It's just a matter of how many there are. Tong Tuesday. At this moment, Gongsun Xinyuan called out indifferently. Tong Tu stepped forward immediately. At some point in time, a person appeared in the row behind Duan Lingtian and apologized to Duan warmly. Do you still remember me? I apologize for my rudeness sturdy young man with a handsome appearance. Although Tong Tu was apologizing, it was not difficult for Duan Lingtian to see his unwillingness. Duan Lingtian turned around he was afraid of the heavenly Emperor Xinyuan. He recognized the person with just a glance. To apologize. I remember you. Duan Lingtian shook his head and looked at Tong Tu meaningfully when he saw the young man's enthusiasm. After all, I wasn't injured that day. Tang Sanpao. Although
Upon
it had been
hearing
half a
Duan
year
Lingtian's
since they
words
last met,
and seen
Duan
Duan Lingtian's
Lingtian
meaningful
still
gaze,
remembered this young
Tong
man
Tu's
who had approached him
expression
as soon as he
unsightly.
arrived at the
His
heavenly palace
celestial
of the
origin
primeval
energy
heaven.
surged out
Back
of his
then,
body before it was
Duan
withdrawn
Lingtian
in
not
just a
only
blink of
asked
an
for
eye.
his name,
But
based
he
on
had also
Duan
told
Lingtian's
him his
performance
name.
in the first
For this
round
reason,
of the Devada
Duan
Realms
Lingtian
Battle of
knew
the
that
Geniuses.
Duan Lingtian
Tong
was
Tu
called
was
Tang
certain
Sanpao.
Duan Lingtian
That's
was
right.
stronger than him.
Tang Sanpao
Duan
nodded.
Lingtian ignored
His
Tong
smile
Tu's
widened as he
dissatisfaction.
said, "I didn't
He shifted
expect
his
you to
gaze to
recognize
Gongsun
me,
Shenyuan,
Brother Duan."
and his heart
"Why
trembled.
you here?
Heavens!
Aren't you with your friends?"
This was Gongsun
Duan
Shenyuan,
Lingtian looked around.
the Yellow Emperor.
He only
one
knew
of the
a few
three
sovereigns
people,
and there was
5
no one
emperors.
else around. It was strange for Tang Sanpao to
However,
appear here.
the Yellow Emperor
Perhaps
was sitting
Duan
right in front
Lingtian
of
was
him.
just here to greet him? "I don't have any friends." Tang Sanpao shook his head.
I went to the Title Temple's branch palace alone.
Duan Lingtian
I only
stared
came
at
here with the
Gongsun
people from the
Shenyuan
Title
with a
Temple.
hint of
I don't know
uncontrollable
anyone
excitement
else.
in his eyes.
Duan Lingtian
When
was
Gongsun
surprised by
Shenyuan
Tang
saw this
Sanpao's
scene,
words.
he couldn't help but
He
be
asked,
stunned. Someone as
"Martial
enthusiastic
nephew
as
Duan,
you should have
could
a
it
lot
be
of
that you've
friends,
seen me
right?"
before?
The
The
scene of
purple-clad
Tang
young man
Sanpao
did not
striking
look
up
at
a
him
conversation
as though he
with
was
Duan
looking at a
Lingtian
stranger.
flashed in his mind.
Instead, it looked
Tang
more like he
Sanpao
was looking at a
smiled awkwardly
long-lost
when he heard
acquaintance.
Duan Lingtian's
That
words.
was why Gongsun
I've been
Shenyuan
cooped up
asked
in the
this
mountains
question.
for a long time.
However,
there
I
was
can't
one
help
thing
but
he was
greet
certain
people when
about.
I see them.
He had no
I don't
recollection
greet
of this
everyone.
young man.
Of
It was
course,
more like he had
among
never
the people
seen
that
him
I
before.
greeted,
Only
Heavenly
you,
Emperor
Brother
Shenyuan,
Duan,
paid attention to
Duan
me.
Lingtian took a
Practically
deep breath
everyone
before
else
he
treated
said,
me coldly,
"It might sound
and some
exaggerated,
even berated
but it's
me."
true." As
The
he
mundane
spoke,
realm
Tang
where I'm
Sanpao
currently
could
from
not
is
help
the
but
same
sigh.
mundane realm
Duan
where my
Lingtian
master is from.
smiled.
However,
he
my
could also
soul
tell
is
that
from the
this Tang
Yanhuang
Sanpao
planet
had
in the
to look at the
Yanhuang
person
realm.
he was trying to strike up a
I grew up
conversation with.
listening to
He
legends
would
about
not
you.
strike up a
Upon
conversation
hearing
with just
Duan
anyone.
Lingtian's words,
He would only
not only
strike
the
up a
Heavenly
conversation
Emperor
with someone
Shenyuan,
he thought
but even
was
his
not
2
ordinary.
disciples and his
However,
master,
how
Feng
many of those
Qingyang,
extraordinary
were taken
people
aback.
weren't proud
This was
and arrogant
especially
people?
true for Feng
Why would they
Qingyang.
pay attention
He did
to
not
others who
expect his
blocked their way
disciple to
and
have
tried
such
to
a
strike
past.
up a conversation?
It wasn't that he hadn't
Even
heard
Duan
of a soul
Lingtian was a
traveling
little
from one
impatient
mundane
with Tang
realm to another
Sanpao's
mundane
endless
realm
chatter
when he first met Tang
transmigrating into
Sanpao.
the body of a
Brother
dying person.
Duan, although
However,
everyone said that you
most
were
of them
young
were
and
just
definitely
rumors,
didn't
and he
have
didn't
much
really
strength,
believe
I
that
don't
they
think
were
so.
true. As
However,
Tang
he
Sanpao
knew
spoke,
since his
he looked at
disciple had
Zhang
said
Tian
it,
Yu
it
and
had
the
to be
other
true.
two who were standing next
Were
to
you
him,
an
causing
outstanding
the three of
person
them to
when
feel
you were on the
awkward and
Yanhuang
guilty?
planet?
How
Gongsun
could someone who was
Shenyuan asked
accepted
with a
as a
solemn
true
expression on
disciple
his
by the
face.
legendary
There was
Heavenly
no
Emperor
hint
of
of
the
shock in his
solitary
eyes.
destructive heaven be
Instead,
ordinary?
it was filled
In
with
the end,
astonishment.
you didn't disappoint
It was
me.
as though he
You
could
managed
understand
to
what
injure
Duan
the true
Lingtian
disciple
meant.
of the Heavenly
An
Emperor
outstanding
of the
person?
solitary destructive
Duan
heaven with
Lingtian
just
pondered
one
for
for
a
a
moment
moment before he
I'm
recalled
looking
his
forward
time
to
on
the
Earth
battle
in
of
his
geniuses
previous life.
in the Devada
Based on
realms.
his strength
I'm
and
eager to
achievements
have a
at that
battle with
time,
you,
it was
Brother
not an
Duan.
exaggeration to
Tang
say that he was an
Sanpao's eyes shone
outstanding
brightly
person.
like the stars
However,
in the night sky.
despite his thoughts,
Eager to
Duan
have a battle
Lingtian
with me?
still asked
Duan
Gongsun
Lingtian
Shenyuan,
was taken
Heavenly
aback by
Emperor
Tang
Sanpao's
What do you
words.
mean by
He
outstanding
looked at
person?
Duan Lingtian
It's
meaningfully.
outstanding in certain
It seemed
aspects.
like Duan Lingtian
Gongsun
was
Shenyuan
also a
replied.
young genius who had the
Gongsun
strength of a
Shenyuan
titled
said,
celestial
I don't know
emperor.
if I count as
Otherwise,
as
he
Duan
would not have
Lingtian
dared to
spoke.
say such
He
words.
explained the background
At
of his
this
era
moment,
on Earth.
even Zhang
At the
Tian
same
Yu
time,
and the other
he
two
also
who were sitting
revealed
next
his
to Tang
identity at that
Sanpao
time
and looking
and
at
what he had
Duan
done
Lingtian
before
in
his
shock.
death.
In his
They
previous
did not
life.
expect Duan
If what you said
Lingtian to
is
be a
true,
titled
your
celestial
achievements
emperor.
in that era can
A
no
battle
longer
with
be
Duan
described as a
Lingtian?
hero.
Su
You can be
turned to
called
look
a
at Tang
peerless hero.
Sanpao.
Gongsun Shenyuan sighed
shook
as
his
he
head
looked at
and
Duan
smiled,
Lingtian, but he did not say anything.
I thought you died in
He
the
thought
divine
Duan
land,
Lingtian
and your
must have
soul
thought
traveled
Duan
to
Lingtian
another
was an
mundane
ordinary
realm.
titled
I didn't
celestial
expect
emperor.
your soul to travel
For
to an
Lin
island
Jueyun,
far
he did not
away
even
from the
turn to
divine
look at
land.
Duan Lingtian.
This kind of
Although
situation
he had
can
yet to
only
witness
happen to
Duan
the
Lingtian's
unparalleled
current
world
strength.
hero.
He knew Duan Lingtian's current
was
strength
even
was
more
not
than
much
much
weaker
by
than
Gongsun
After
Shenyuan's
all,
words.
it was
He had
impossible
no
for
idea
an
why
ordinary
Gongsun
titled
Shenyuan
celestial
would say
emperor
such
to
a be a match for Duan Ling Tian. Senior Shenyuan, could it be heavenly emperor of the primeval transmigrated? At this moment, it shouldn't be too different from what I've imagined. Duan Ling Tian and the others. Shenyuan looked at Duan Ling Tian and the others raised their heads to look. Uncontrollable excitement could be seen in the depths of his eyes. The heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven. You have 99 heavenly veins in your body, people following behind him. 99 heavenly veins. Among them, there was not only were his two true disciples, it was stunned by Gongsun Xuanyuan's words, celestial but emperor who had led the way for Duan narrowed slightly. Wei Qi was also a true disciple of Ding Fu. He had only found out about Duan primeval heaven. 99 heavenly veins after meeting Duan Ling Tian. Senior, how did you know? Morning heaven. Duan Ling Tian is the palace master and two vice palace masters of the title was not a god. Even if he was surrounded by divine consciousness, the heavenly he would be able to block the person's officials of the title temples from entering his body. In the Devata realms, could it be that a divine spirit had probed him and the geniuses is about to begin? The appearance
However,
of the group
that
of
was
heavenly
not very
emperors
likely.
and high-ranking officials from the various Devata realms
After all,
caused an uproar
his master
among the
had
crowd.
left a divine
Many
spirit
young
mark on him.
geniuses stared at
If
the
a
group of
divine
people who
spirit
had just
probed
arrived.
him with their divine
A group
spirit,
of titled
his master
celestial
would be able
emperors
to
from
inform him
various
immediately.
Devata realms
He
appeared
might even
one
be able
after
to block
another,
the divine
attracting
spirit
many
for a
people's
short period
attention.
of time.
Apart from
Naturally,
that,
he would
many
only
people
be able
also
to block
paid
the
attention
divine
to the
spirit
palace
for a short
masters of the
period of
title
time to
temples
warn
in
the
the
divine
Devata
spirit.
realms.
If the divine
Naturally,
spirit
the heavenly
insisted on
emperors
probing
from
him,
the Devata
his
realms
master's
attracted
divine
the most
spirit mark
attention.
would not be able to
That's
stop it.
Sidu Zhuqing,
Haha,
the heavenly
emperor
emperor
of the
Luo
Luo River
laughed
heaven.
heartily.
Not long
Then
after
he looked at Duan
withdrew
and
his
said,
gaze,
"Junior
a
nephew
voice
Duan,
resonated
please
in the
wait
air.
for a moment."
His eyes
I'll call the
narrowed
two
as
old
he
fellows
stared at
over.
the sky.
I'll tell
A
you why I guessed
graceful
you
and
have
luxurious
99
figure
heavenly
appeared
veins
in
when I
front
heard
of him.
about your soul
It was a beautiful
transmigration.
woman.
Soon
She had a
after,
smile on
two
her
figures
beautiful
appeared
face.
in front of Duan
She didn't look
Lingtian
like
after
someone who had been on the
Gongsun
run for
sent
many
out the
years.
voice transmissions.
A tall and
One of
well-built
them was the
middle-aged
emperor
man
of
with
the
a face
Jade
as
Emperor
fair
Heaven,
as jade
Yu
stood next to her.
The other
He was
person was
chatting
the
with her with a
grandson
smile on his
celestial
face.
emperor.
At this moment,
the hall
many
master
people
of the
began
title
to
temples
whisper among
branch
themselves.
in the Xian Yuan heaven.
That's the
Jade
Chi
Emperor.
Hongtian Emperor?
Tathagata.
That's right. Naturally,
the Chi
Duan
Hongtian Emperor
Lingtian was
Zhou
no
Bingwu,
stranger to these
who's
two
ranked
people.
fifth on the heavenly
Naturally,
emperor ranking.
this was his first
They
time
seemed
meeting
to
them
know
in
each
person.
other.
Upon hearing these words, Duan Lingtian
After
narrowed his
everyone
eyes
greeted them,
slightly.
the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven
said
actually
bluntly,
dares to
"The
show
Wind
herself?
Celestial Emperor's
Is the
only
battle
true
of the
disciple
geniuses
should have the
really
flaming
that
yellow
attractive
physique
to her?
on planet
Or
Yan
perhaps
Huang.
she thinks the
Tathagata was
heavenly
also
emperor
known
of the
as
heavenly
Sakimune.
heaven,
Before
Shihong,
Gongsun
will be able to
Shenyuan
protect her.
ascended, he had been calling him
Duan
Sakimune,
Lingtian's
and he
eyes
still called him
flashed
coldly
Sakimune.
when he heard these
Perhaps
words.
the only
In the
people
past,
who knew
the
Tathagata's
heavenly
other
emperor
name
of
were
the
those
Luo
from
River
planet
heavenly
Yan
heaven
Huang
and
had
the
sent
Yan
people
Huang
to his
realm,
hometown,
flaming
the Saint
yellow
Province
physique,
realm,
to kill
Upon
him.
hearing Gongsun
After learning that the
Xuanyuan's
Saint
words,
Province
Duan
realm belonged to
Lingtian
his
and
master,
Feng Qingyang
the
were
heavenly
not the
emperor
only
of the
ones who were
Luo River
confused.
heavenly heaven
Even
left
Yu
the Luo
Dongfang
River
and
heavenly
Tong Tu,
palace. Gongsun
Since
Xuanyuan's
Master
true
brought me to the
disciples
Luo
were
River
confused.
sect.
I'm
At
sure
this
she knows
moment,
about my
Yu
relationship
Haotian
with
and
Master.
Rulai's gazes landed
Duan
on Duan
Lingtian
thought to
thought in
himself.
unison.
She
There was a
still
hint
dares
of
to show
surprise in their
herself?
eyes.
Duan
They had
Lingtian
received a
did not
message
know
from Gongsun Shenyuan,
the
in
heavenly
the message
emperor
of the Luo River
Gongsun
heaven,
Shenyuan had
found the
only
courage
said
to
that
show
he
her
had
something
something
important to tell
especially
them,
since his
but he
master
did not
was in the
mention that
heavenly
he had
palace
discovered
of
the
the
flaming
primeval
yellow
heaven.
physique. The heavenly
Shenyuan,
emperor of the
are you
Luo
sure?
River heaven? Yu Hao
At this
Tian
moment,
asked solemnly as he
Zhang
looked
Tianyu,
at Gongsun
Wang Ting,
Shenyuan,
and he
There's no
instinctively
mistake,
turned to look at
Gongsun
Duan Lingtian.
Shenyuan replied. They had heard about the
Gongsun
conflict
Shenyuan
between the
said,
heavenly
his
emperor of the
experience
Luo
is
River
exactly
heaven
the
and
same
Duan
as the
Lingtian
flaming
since
yellow
their
physique.
seniors were close
Furthermore,
to the heavenly
he
palace
admitted
of the
that he has
solitary
99
destructive heavenly veins
They
in his
knew the
body.
heavenly emperor
I
of
didn't
the
expect to
solitary
see the
destructive
flaming
heaven
yellow
would not
physique
let the
again
heavenly
after
emperor
so many
of the
years.
Luo River heaven off
Moreover,
so easily.
he has even become
They
a
also knew
titled
the heavenly
celestial
emperor
emperor
of the Luo River
when
heaven
Gongsun
had left
Shenyuan
the
had
Luo
confirmed
River
that
heaven
Duan
out of fear
Lingtian
of the
had
heavenly
99
emperor of the
veins.
solitary
He had looked at
destructive
Duan
heaven.
Lingtian with
Young
glowing
Master
eyes
Duan,
as though he was
why
looking
is
at
the
a rare
heavenly
treasure
emperor of the
instead of a
Luo
living
River
person.
heaven so bold
Upon
as to
seeing
show
this,
herself here?
Duan Lingtian
Isn't she
felt
afraid the
goosebumps
heavenly
rising on
emperor
his
will
skin.
punish her?
He Jenny asked curiously. He even
At this
regretted
moment,
revealing that
Zhang
his soul
Tianyu
came
and
from
Wang
planet
Ting
Yan
also
Huang
looked
in the
at Duan
Yan Huang
Lingtian
realm.
in
The
confusion.
reason why he said
Could
it
it
was
be
because
that
it
the
was no
heavenly
longer a
emperor of
secret
the
to
Luo
him,
River
and
heaven
no one
had
would care about
secretly
it.
reached an
In the
agreement with
Devata
the heavenly
realms,
emperor
there were
of the
many
solitary
strange people
destructive
and
heaven?
strange things.
Could it be
Among
that she
them,
has reached
there
an
was no
agreement
lack
with the
of
heavenly
strange
emperor
things that
and you?
happened to Duan Lingtian.
He Jenny asked
However,
curiously.
it did not cross
There's no
Duan
agreement.
Lingtian's mind that
Duan
not only was the
Lingtian shook
heavenly
his head.
emperor of the Xian
Then
Yuan heaven
he glanced
shocked,
at the
but
heavenly
even the
emperor
heavenly
of the
emperor
Luo
of the
River
Jade
heaven
Emperor
indifferently
and
and
Tathagata,
said,
perhaps
the
she
palace
thinks
master
the
of the
heavenly
title
emperor of
temple
the
subhall
Luo
of
River
the
heaven
Xian
has
Yuan
something
heaven
to rely
were
on.
shocked as well.
Or perhaps she thinks the
Flaming
heavenly
yellow
emperor
physique.
of the Luo
At
River
this
heaven
moment,
won't make a move at
Tathagata
this
shifted
time.
his gaze from
The
Duan
heavenly
Lingtian
emperor
to
of the
Feng
Luo
Qingyang
River
and
heaven
said,
won't make a
"Wind
move at
heavenly
this
emperor?
time. I've had
Zhang
many
Tianyu
disciples in
and
my
the
life,
other two
but
looked at
none
each
of them
other
were
and shook their heads. If it was an ordinary heavenly emperor, I wonder if you're willing to let me take you as my last disciple? Would the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven glanced at Tathagata indifferently and said, "Those who knew about the enmity between the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven and the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven could not help although I don't know what the flaming yellow physique is, I'm sure there's a secret behind it since they're so concerned about heaven." However,
why is she still
since
here?
Tathagata is
Isn't
already
she
a god,
afraid of encountering
it's best for you to stay away from him to avoid any danger.
Emperor
There are many
is here
unique
as well,
physiques in the
right?
Devata realms.
Did they
But
reach
this
an
is the
agreement?
first time I've heard
Most
of the
people
flaming
thought the
yellow
heavenly
physique.
emperor of the
Many
Luo River
titled
heaven
celestial
and the heavenly
emperors and
emperor
even
of the
heavenly
solitary
emperors would want to
destructive heaven
possess
had
the
reached
bodies
an
of
agreement.
celestial emperors
Otherwise,
and heavenly
they could not
emperors.
figure out
As
why
long
the
as they
heavenly
don't die
emperor of the
prematurely,
Luo River
it's
heaven
almost
dared to
certain
come
that
here.
they'll be able to
Although the
attain
news
godhood.
of Feng Qingyang,
I've also heard
the
a
heavenly
rumor in the
emperor
past,
of the
but I'm
solitary
not sure if
destructive
it's
heaven,
true or
going
not.
to the Luo River
A human
heaven
with
to look for
99 heavenly
Sudujing,
veins who
the heavenly
possesses a
emperor
unique
of the Luo
physique
River
has a
heaven
potential
was
that's
not
widely
inferior
known.
to a
It was
divine
still
beast.
widely known.
Feng Qingyang
At this
said,
moment, in the
those
past,
who were unaware
Feng
of the
Qingyang
truth
did
of the
not
matter
tell
began to
Duan
learn
Lingtian
about
about
it
this
from those
because
who
he was
were in the
worried it
know.
would cause Duan Lingtian to slack
The
off on his
heavenly emperor
cultivation.
of the Luo River
Everyone
heaven
knew that they had
actually sent
99
someone to kill
heavenly
the
veins,
heavenly emperor
and if
of the
nothing
solitary
unexpected
destructive
happened,
heaven,
they would definitely
how could a
become
heavenly
gods.
emperor of a
Under
Devata
such
realm do
circumstances,
such a thing?
many people
This
would
is
no
an
longer
evil
cultivate
deed
as
that will
hard as they
incur
did
the
before,
wrath of the
because they
heavens.
subconsciously
Even
felt
if
that they
heavenly
were the
emperor
seeds
Feng
of gods.
Qingyang makes a move,
I didn't tell you
the
about
heavenly
this
emperor
because
of
I
the
was worried
primeval
it would
heaven
affect
and
your
the title
cultivation.
temple won't interfere.
In the end,
right?
Feng
Since she
Qingyang
dares
still
to come
explained,
here, it's
I
impossible
understand,
she
Master.
didn't think of the consequences.
After listening to Feng Qingyang's
Perhaps
words,
she really has
Duan
reached an
Lingtian
agreement
looked
with
at
Tathagata,
Tathagata,
who had shifted his gaze from
Feng
the heavenly
Qingyang to him.
emperor of the Luo
Before
River heaven
Tathagata could
and the
speak,
Chi Hong
he
Tian
said,
emperor
Pavilion
landed on a
Master
floating
Tathagata,
island.
she
sat
Duan
down with a
Lingtian
smile
will
on her
only
face.
acknowledge one
Based
master
on her
in my
expression,
life.
she
That's
did
my
not
current
seem
master,
afraid at all.
Feng Qingyang.
Where did Situ
From now
Zhuqing
on,
get her
no matter
confidence
how
from?
powerful a god
However,
or a
I'm
supreme
afraid that
expert
Chi
is,
Hong Tian
I
emperor
will
won't
never
be able to
acknowledge
stop
him as my master.
right?
Duan
Lingtian's
Lingtian's
words
eyes
killed
flashed
Tathagata's
coldly
thoughts.
as though he was about to
Upon
devour
hearing this,
Zhuqing.
Tathagata's eyes flashed.
Silence.
However, his expression remained calm as he said, "Since you've made up your mind,
Chapter
I won't force
3455.
After
As
he finished
the news
speaking,
spread,
he looked at
more and more
Feng
people
Qingyang
turned
and
to
said,
look at Situ
"Wind
Zhuqing,
Heavenly Emperor,
the heavenly
10 years
emperor of
after
the
the
Luo
Devata
River heaven.
realms battle of
However,
the geniuses,
even under
I'll head to
everyone's
the heavenly
watchful
palace
eyes,
of the
Situ
solitary
Zhuqing's
destructive
expression
heaven
remained
and have a
calm.
battle with you.
It was as though
if
she
you
was
lose,
fearless.
you'll step down
Suddenly,
from your position
as though she had a
heavenly
flash
emperor.
of inspiration,
A hint
she
of
shifted her
killing
gaze to
intent
Duan
flashed in the
Lingtian.
depths of
It was not
Tathagata's
difficult
eyes
for
when he
Duan
finished speaking
Lingtian
to figure out why she was behaving this way. Someone must have informed her of his identity through voice
Chapter
transmission.
3465.
Duan Lingtian met Situ Zhuqing's gaze fearlessly
Upon hearing
as a sneer
Tathagata's
appeared
words,
on his face.
Feng Qingyang lifted his head
Duan
lazily
Lingtian
and glanced at
At this
Tathagata.
moment, a woman's
Farewell.
voice rang in Duan
Tathagata
Lingtian's
glanced
ears.
at Feng Qingyang
I'm
before
Situ
he nodded
Zhuqing,
at Duan
the heavenly
Lingtian
emperor
and turned
of
to
the
leave.
Luo River heaven.
As soon as he turned around
Situ
to leave,
Zhuqing said
Duan
through voice
Lingtian
transmission,
felt a
the
powerful
enmity
divine
between me
consciousness
and your
sweeping
master,
toward him
Feng
and shrouding
Qingyang,
his
is all
entire
because
body.
of you.
It made
If
him
you didn't
feel
kill
as
my
though
daughter,
he was a
I
lone
wouldn't
boat
have
in the
vented my
vast
anger
ocean,
on your
drifting
hometown,
aimlessly.
the mundane realm.
However,
even if I
Duan
couldn't find you,
Lingtian suddenly
what do you
felt
think?
a burning sensation
If you're willing to
between
look
his
for Feng
eyebrows.
Qingyang and
It was
ask
the
him to let
divine
go of this
consciousness
enmity,
mark left
I won't
behind
pursue
by
the
his
matter
master,
of you killing my
Feng
daughter
Qingyang.
anymore. It was a
Duan
gray sword
Lingtian
mark.
was taken aback
As soon
when
as
he
it
heard
appeared,
Situ
it
Zhuqing's
turned into
words.
countless
Then
divine
he
consciousness
replied
disdainfully
disdainfully
through
swept
voice
out in
transmission.
all directions.
You're the heavenly
Alas,
emperor
it
of
was
the
still
Luo
too late.
River heaven. The
What
divine
can you do
consciousness
even
that
if you want to
shrouded
pursue
Duan
the matter?
Lingtian seemed to
Don't
have
tell me you
intentionally
dare to make a
avoided
move
Duan
on me?
Lingtian's glabella.
Duan Lingtian
When the
did
divine
not believe
consciousness
Situ
mark
Zhuqing
appeared
would
between
dare to make a
Duan
move on
Lingtian's
him here.
eyebrows,
Even
even
if
if
his
his
master
master
had
had
not
not
shown
shown
up,
Lingtian's
the
body.
heavenly emperor
Although
of the
it was
primeval
only a
heaven
rough
would
scan,
not let
it was
Situ
not
Zhuqing
difficult
have her
for it
way
to find out
let
how
alone
many
the
heavenly
others.
veins Duan
Apart from
Lingtian
being the
had in
host
his
of the
body.
battle of
It's
geniuses,
the flaming
the heavenly
emperor
physique
of the primeval heaven
Tathagata's
was also
a
a
good
good
friend
friend
of
of
Duan
Duan and
Lingtian's
disappeared in
master.
the blink of an eye.
He was also ranked
Tathagata's
fourth on the
heavenly
scan
emperor
caused
ranking.
Duan Lingtian's
He was
expression
stronger
to
than
darken.
the Chi Hong
Even
Tian emperor,
Gongsun
Zhou
Zhou
Bingwu, the heavenly
Although
emperor
Zhou
of the
Bingwu,
Shenyuan
the
heaven,
heavenly
and
emperor
Yu
of the
Haoyan,
Chi Hong
the
Tian,
heavenly emperor
was
of
ranked
the
at the
Jade
top
Emperor
of the
heaven,
heavenly emperor
felt
ranking.
awkward. He was
They
ranked
did not
behind
expect
the heavenly
Tathagata
emperor
to
of
be
the
so
primeval
brazen.
heaven,
Did he
Dingfu.
forget set that the flaming emperor
are you going to stay
master
by
was
Feng
Feng
Qingyang's
Qingyang,
side and
the
hide
heavenly
in the
emperor
heavenly
of the
palace of the
solitary destructive heaven?
As
Soon
soon
as
as Gong
Gong
Sun
sneered in
Xianyuan and
response,
Yu Haoyan thought
her
about
tone
it,
was filled
Feng
with
Qingyang
threat.
snorted coldly.
Then,
A
Tian
great
chuckled.
divine consciousness
Aren't you
shot out
afraid
from
that you
between his
won't be able to
eyebrows
leave
and
this
turned
place
into
alive?
a sword in the
Don't
blink
you
of an
know
eye.
that my master
It
is
whistled
also
as it
in the
shot
heavenly
toward
palace
Pythagoras'
of the
divine
primeval
consciousness?
Almost as soon as
The divine
Duan
Lingtian
Lingtian
finished
appeared as if it
speaking
could
and before
destroy
Sidu
everything.
Zhuqing could respond,
In just a blink of an
crowd
eye,
burst into an uproar.
Pythagoras' voice rang
It's
in the
Feng
air.
Qingyang,
Feng
the
Qingyang,
heavenly
I'll
emperor
meet
of the
you in the
solitary
heavenly
destructive
palace of
heaven.
the solitary
I've
destructive
finally
heaven
met the
in 100
legendary
years.
heavenly emperor of the
100
solitary
years.
destructive
Duan
heaven.
Lingtian was stunned
He's as
by
handsome as
Pythagoras'
jade
words.
and mighty as
Didn't
the rumors
Pythagoras,
say. The great sun
it said that
celestial
Feng
emperor
Qingyang is
say
the
he would
youngest
challenge
heavenly
his
master
master in the
10
Devata
years
realms.
after the Devata
That's
realms
right.
battle of the
I've
geniuses?
heard that he's an
Why
ascender
did
who
it
has
become
only
100
ascended
years
for
now?
10,000 years.
At the same time, that he's able to achieve so much in just 10,000 years, in a mouthful of cold air. For heavenly emperors who stood at the peak of the Devata realms, 10,000 years was not a spiritual sense attack. After all, had injured most heavenly emperors had lived for tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years. Injured. There were even some who wouldn't have delayed the battle 10 years later to 100 years later. One progressed in 100 years later, the more difficult it was to cultivate. I will definitely kill you. The Devata realms battle of geniuses was held once every 1,000 years. His expression there would always be a few five-star gods of war under the age of 1,000. No one spoke. Most of these geniuses would be stuck at a bottleneck. Even if they were given 10,000 or 10,000 years, heavenly Emperor Xian difficult for them to make any progress. Yen Huang physique? Only a small number of them would be able to continue growing stronger. He could see the displeasure in Feng Qingyang's eyes. Some people were extremely talented in the beginning. I didn't expect the profundities they needed to comprehend reached a certain level. I wouldn't have allowed him for them to cross the threshold. Feng Qingyang's expression eased slightly when he heard Gongsun might be able to comprehend the fusion of three profundities easily, but it would take them tens of thousands of years to comprehend the fourth profundity. It's a crazy idea that the powerhouses of the legendary heavenly emperor with after many years of research on the unique physiques in the Devata heaven as soon as he arrived. We discovered many similarities between the unique agreement yet and the unique physiques. How dare the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven come here of human activity? Is she tired of living? Most of it was due to the influence of formations. Flying towards Sidujuqing, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven, many years of research, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven, and staring at her coldly, Yen Huang realm broke out among the crowd. Formation that gave many people's eyes lit up as though they were waiting to watch a show. It seemed like they would be able to witness a battle between heavenly emperors today. We basically copied it from others. Sidujuqing, for this reason, expect you to show yourself after hiding for so many years. On planet Yen Qingyang's voice was not like there haven't been, but it was exceptionally clear in the quiet Devata realms. However, those with the Yen Qingyang's casual tone through other methods, anyone would be able to detect the coldness in his voice. But they were stuck at the great overarching golden celestial stage after ascending to the Devata realms. Feng Qingyang, we allowed a heavenly Yen Huang physiques to ascend on their own, but they died in the celestial middle-aged man as soon as they ascended rose to his feet. Nobody attacked them. He was none other than the energy of the celestial ascension emperor caused their souls and bodies on the heavenly emperor ranking. They couldn't coexist with each other, so they died instantly. Of the primeval heaven. As for those who didn't ascend to the Devata realms, came out of the Azura hell, they broke through one of the seven overarching places in the Devata realms. He was ranked those who had ascended to the Devata ranking. I've heard about the enmity between you and the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven. Those people with the Yen looked at physique have extremely high innate talent and comprehension ability. It's because your disciple killed the daughter of the heavenly emperor of the Luo River bodies. That's why the heavenly emperor died before they could break through to the great and slaughtered many people in your hometown. We knew there must be a problem with the formation we set up. Did not respond to Zhou Binggu's tirade. It was an imitation of a formation. He looked at Zhou Binggu indifferently. And we couldn't figure it out. In the end, we gave up and stopped caring about the Yen Huang with a faint smile. In just a blink of an eye, thousands of years have eyes flashed coldly as he said, to meet someone with the Yen Huang physique here. Who do you think you are? Gongsun Xianyuan under the watchful eyes of the crowd. No one expected the formation we imitated isn't just for show. Heavens! Otherwise, it wouldn't have given birth to so many people with the Yen Huang physique. The fifth on the heavenly we didn't encounter anyone with the Yen Huang physique was not as strong as him. The difference to another mundane realm, right? Even if he did, could it be that the rumors were true if he didn't say he was a transmigrator? Feng Qingyang really they died when they were growing up? Even Duan Lingtian was taken aback. Currently in some Devata realm. He did not expect his master, that there's somewhere in the Jade Emperor heaven in front of him, would become a completely different person in front of outsiders. Instinctively. The heavenly emperor of the Jade Emperor heaven was one of the people who had participated in the creation of the Yen Huang changed drastically. Naturally, this was especially true one of them as well. The soul transmigrated. Duan Lingtian darkened as he asked the shock in his heart. Emperor Feng Qingyang, are you trying to start a war? How his soul had transmigrated from Earth to another mundane realm. A wave of scorching heat searching for an answer, but he had not been able to find it. Then a monstrous flame rose into the sky and enveloped the entire floating island, spreading in all directions. In just a blink of an eye, the scorching aura spread to every corner of the Devata realm. Physique. A war. Is there someone like me among them who transmigrated? The heavenly emperors of the primeval heaven, The other heavenly emperors narrowed their eyes when they realized a war was about to break out. Their souls didn't transmigrate to other realms. Feng Qingyang said, "They seem to have set up a series of formations in the formation, allowing their souls to transmigrate to their targets with the special physique the legendary heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven was different from your situation. He did not give them any face at all. The reason why your soul transmigrated indiscriminately your master is too domineering, because the formation we set up is my idol. It's caused by a flaw in the formation." Who was standing behind Duan Lingtian's words were laced with embarrassment. Meanwhile, Zhang was rendered speechless and the other two heavenly emperors standing next to Tang Sanpao. As it turned out, the majestic figure in the distance with burning had transmigrated. They were the legendary heavenly emperors of the solitary destructive and the others had set up invincible swords celestials. That his soul had transmigrated to another mundane realm. Uncle Feng to have such a side to him. Of the formation we set up back then, when I heard you talk about your transmigration stood behind Ding Fu with a shocked you if you have 99 heavenly veins because I wanted to confirm your identity and see if you have the flaming yellow physique that has always been polite and courteous to me. Although I heard he once killed a heavenly emperor for Ming's mouth twitched. The heavenly savage celestial emperor and the others to be even more domineering than me. It's true that there are new talents in every generation, and the new generation replaces the old to imitate others. Ding Fu sighed when he reached the end of his sentence. In disguise for you. In terms of age, Feng Qingyang was younger than him by more than 100,000 years. Since you have the Yan Huang physique, many disciples as long as you don't slack off, you'll definitely become a god in the future. Born in his hometown, in fact, it's difficult for ordinary celestials to become a god. However, legendary heavenly emperor who was only slightly over 10,000 years old had already surpassed continue to cultivate. At this moment, you'll definitely the other heavenly emperors of the Devata realms you might even become a god before Hao with a shocked expression on their faces. As Gongsun did heavenly emperor Feng Qingyang looked at you really become a god? The heavenly emperor of the Jade Emperor the Qi Hong Tian Emperor. A hint of envy could be seen in you Hao expression on his face as he looked at heavenly emperor Feng Qingyang. As for Tong, everyone says you've become a god. Today, I'd like to see how strong you really are. Although as soon as he finished speaking, was calm, he could not hide the shock in the depths of his eyes. The flames around his body quickly condensed, a hint of fear gathered around his body. It was like as though he had recalled something, making it difficult for people to look at him directly. Although you're considered to have the Yan Huang surged out and shrouded the entire place, causing everyone to feel as though they were in the middle of a scorching summer. You're only as strong as you are today because of your own efforts. Feel the terrifying flames around. If we need a favor from you one day, with the temperature of the flames around Zhou Binwu, a hint of worry flashed in the world that could not be smelted when he reached the end of his sentence. I've told you, you're not worthy. That's not a problem. Feng Qingyang shook his head. Nodded. Then, without although he was considered to be a khaki-colored energy shot up into the sky above his head. To a certain extent, a blink of an eye, it was because of transformed into a gigantic that he was able to survive in his previous life. Since Gongsun Xinyuan had asked for a favor, he naturally had to return it. Forte the After law all, of destruction, Duan Lingtian did not like owing people favors to deal with Qi Hongqian's heavenly emperor Duan Lingtian. The heavenly emperor broke out among the crowd when they saw to Duan Lingtian. Not only were the young geniuses shocked, but even the titled celestial emperors present on the scene emperor of the Jade Emperor Heaven left as well. After Yu Dongfang and Tong Tu left, Duan Lingtian's lips twitched again as he looked at Gongsun Xinyuan, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, was at the peak of the Devata realms, one of the 7 deadliest places in the Devata experiment for the sake of a special physique. Was well known in the Devata realms. Have fun. Everyone knew that the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven was skilled in the law of destruction. However, most people did not expect Feng Qingyang, they had to part ways with their master and the heavenly emperor of the Jade Emperor Heaven. The law of Earth after the duel instead left. Of the law of Earth. Yu Hao Tian, how could the heavenly emperor of the Jade Emperor Heaven, the Qi Hong Tian Emperor Xinyuan, and asked, the law of Earth. Xinyuan, why did you ask for a favor from him? Was ranked 5th. Are you worried on the heavenly emperor ranking in the Devata realms? He was much stronger than the other 76 heavenly emperors in the Devata realms. Naturally, some people were shocked by this news as well. Or are you worried that he'll be defeated by the heavenly solitary destructive heaven has most likely attained godhood? Tian asked. Even Zhou Bingu, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, expression could be seen on his face as he said. Zhou Bingu's expression changed drastically when Feng Qingyang's yellow greatsword shone brightly and emitted a terrifying by the old monk we encountered in the undead world. One of the 7 deadliest greatsword in the Devata realms. That
although
old
this
monk
was the
is
second
evil by
time he
nature,
had sensed the aura,
after he
it was
forcefully merged his
unforgettable.
soul with
It was the
Tathagata's
aura
soul.
of divine
Tathagata's
energy.
temperament
Divine
became
energy,
much more ruthless.
the energy
Earlier,
of a god.
he checked
It
Duan
seemed like
Lingtian's body to see if
Feng
Duan
Qingyang, the heavenly
Lingtian has the
emperor of the
flaming
solitary
yellow
destructive
physique.
heaven,
I
had
suspect he
attained
wants to
godhood.
possess Duan
Heavenly
Lingtian's
Emperor
body.
Feng Qingyang,
Although most of his
please
will
show
is
mercy.
controlled by Tathagata's
Now,
will,
Zhou
at
Bingwu
least
was
not
terrified.
all of it.
Although
I can
he had
sense he'll
faintly
try to
touched the
escape from
threshold of a
Tathagata's
god and could be
body
called
if
a
he has the
demigod.
chance.
He knew that
After
compared
all,
to a
he
real
doesn't
god,
have
the difference was
100%
like heaven and
autonomy
earth.
in Tathagata's
A true
body.
god did not
He
even
only
need
has
to
60%
fuse the profundities
autonomy
of
at
laws
most.
to suppress him.
Gongsun
After all,
Xinyuan said,
divine energy
seems
was
like
much
the
stronger
flaming
than
yellow
celestial
physique we
origin
created
energy.
is very tempting.
As a demigod,
Even that
he
old
knew the
bald
difference
donkey
between
who seems
divine
to be a god
energy
has
and
his
divine
eyes on
energy.
Duan Lingtian's body.
Yu
Rumble.
Hao Tian said as he sighed.
A loud explosion
Then,
interrupted
as though he had
Zhou
recalled
Bingwu's
something,
words.
he asked, if
When
that
Zhou
old
Bingwu
bald
sensed
donkey
Feng
leaves
Qingyang's
Tathagata's
irresistible
body,
will,
will Tathagata's
he no
soul
longer
recover?
dared to be careless.
Gongsun Xinyuan
His body
nodded.
shone brightly like
Yes,
a dazzling
but it'll
sun
take at
that
least
illuminated
10,000
heaven
years
and
for
earth
him to recover.
However,
After
all,
defeating Zhou Bingwu's
Tathagata's soul
all-out
has been
defense,
severely
when that
injured.
enormous sword descended,
That's because
the
his soul
power on
is
his
also
body
a
was
god's
completely
soul.
defeated.
Otherwise,
then
it'll
he
take
was
at
crushed
least
to the ground,
10,000 years
his
for
body
him to
sinking
recover.
into the earth.
Gongsun Xinyuan
with
said,
a loud bang,
why
the
didn't you
giant
warn them
sword
earlier?
disappeared.
Why didn't you
When
tell
Zhou
them the
Bingwu
situation
stood up
and
and
asked them
sorry
to show
state?
mercy?
His face
Yu
was
Hao
already
Tian
ashen.
asked.
His
How
eyes
should I
and
warn
face
them?
were filled with
Gongsun
terror and fear.
Xinyuan shook his head.
This was the
I
power
can't
of a
possibly
god.
tell them that
He was
Tathagata is
powerless
no
of
longer
the
the
heavenly
Tathagata
emperor
of
of
the
heaven.
past.
Heavenly
If that old
emperor
monk
of the
succeeds in
heavenly
seizing
emperor
Duan
of the
Lingtian's
heavens
body,
Tathagata
heavens,
will regain his
heavenly
freedom.
emperor
But
of
if that
the heaven
heavenly
monk
emperor
fails,
of
he
heaven
will be in
heaven
danger.
realm, which is equivalent
That's
to bringing
too terrifying.
Tathagata into danger.
His strength is too
Unless
terrifying.
a supreme
Qi
expert makes a
Hongtian
move,
emperor is ranked
otherwise
5th on
no
the
one
heavenly
can destroy
emperor
that
ranking.
old monk without
It's said that
harming
he's close
Tathagata.
to becoming a demigod.
Tathagata had been friends
However,
with
he can't
Gongsun
even
Xinyuan
withstand
for
a
many
single
years.
blow from heavenly
Naturally,
emperor of
he
heaven
wouldn't let
realm
anything
Feng
happen
Qingyang.
to his good friend.
Most importantly,
it was also
heavenly
because of this
emperor
that
of
he held
heaven
back his
Feng
words
Qingyang
and
from
didn't use the
Feng
law of
Qingyang and
destruction.
Duan Lingtian.
He only used
Although
the law
he
of
had
earth.
some friendship with
in the
Feng
past,
Qingyang,
I've never
was
heard of
naturally
heavenly emperor of
incomparable to
heaven
his
Feng
friendship
Qingyang
with
using the
Tathagata.
law of earth.
As for Duan Lingtian,
Me too. It was his
this was the
first day
first
meeting
time
him.
Feng Qingyang
On
had
one
displayed
hand,
the power
you
of a
asked
god
for a favor
in front of
from
everyone.
Duan Lingtian
Everyone
so that you
knew
could
the
save
legendary
Tathagata's
heavenly
life at a
emperor
critical
of the
moment.
solitary
But on
destructive
the other
heaven
hand,
was not
you
just a
also
rumor
hoped that
he had
Tathagata
really
could
become
regain
a
his
god.
freedom.
So
The
you
rumors
didn't
were
remind
not
them.
groundless.
The current Tathagata
Brother
is
Feng,
no longer
although
the
Ding
Tathagata
Fu,
of the past,
the heavenly
and he
emperor of
most
the
likely
primeval
has his
heaven,
eyes
knew
set
that
on
Feng
Duan
Qingyang
Lingtian's
had
body.
become a god.
Yu
He
Hao
was still
Tian could see
shocked when he saw
everything
Feng
clearly now.
Qingyang easily
Of
defeating
course,
Qi
he could
Hongtian
understand
and
Gongsun
Zhou Bingwu.
Xuanyuan's
Then
decision.
he smiled
If he were
bitterly.
in Gongsun
He knew that
Xuanyuan's
when he
shoes,
challenged
he would have
Feng
made the
Qingyang in
same
the
choice.
past. Feng
I have
Qingyang had
no
shown him
intention
mercy.
of harming the innocent. However,
Otherwise,
when there's no
he
way
would
to
not
get
have
the
been
best of
defeated
both
so
worlds,
easily.
I had no
He had been
choice but
puzzled
to
at
make this
first.
choice.
Was it
When
not said that the
Gongsun
celestial
said these
origin
words,
energy
a
of a
hint of
celestial
guilt
being was
flashed in
not
the depths of
comparable
his
to the
eyes.
divine energy
Naturally,
of a god?
this guilt
Why
was
he able
because
to
of
barely
Duan
withstand
Lingtian.
it? Now
Let
that the
nature
truth was
take
out,
its course.
he knew Feng
If that
Qingyang
old
had
monk
held
fails,
back when he
we'll
challenged
ask
him.
Duan Lingtian
He's
for
too
a
strong
favor and ask
Is
him to
this
spare
the
his
power
life.
of a god?
After all,
Tang
his
Sanpao,
life and death
who was
are
standing
tied
behind
together with
Duan
Tathagata's
Lingtian,
life
stared
and
at
death.
Feng
Yu
Qingyang from
Hao Tian
afar.
sighed and
The
said,
fervent
if
look in
there's a
his
second
eyes grew
time,
even
we
more
won't ask again.
intense and
After
uncontrollable.
all, when we first
Among
met
the people
Tathagata
present on the
as
scene,
his friends,
only
we've
Duan
already done our
Lingtian
best
and
to
Lin
help him.
Jueyun remained
If
calm.
that old monk takes
Duan
Lingtian's
had learned
body,
from
we'll
Feng
do our
Qingyang
best to
about the
protect his
difference in
family
strength
so that his
between a
family can
celestial
live a
and a
life
god.
without worries.
Even the servant
This
of the
will
Yun
show our
clan
guilt.
who had forced Feng Qingyang into the Azura Hell, one of the
Gongsun
7
Xinyuan
deadliest
agreed with Yu
places
Hao
in the
Tian's
Devata
words.
realms, was
I
only
agree.
a demigod.
Duan
Lin
Lingtian,
Jueyun, on
naturally,
the other hand,
was unaware
had been
of the
around
private
a group
conversation
of gods
between
since he was young.
Gongsun Xinyuan,
Naturally,
the
he
heavenly
knew
emperor
how
of the
powerful
Yellow
gods
origin heaven, naturally, the palace masters of the tidal temple sub-palaces who were present on the others were also aware that Feng Qingyang had become a god for a while before leaving. They would not have placed Feng Qingyang in the top 3 on the heavenly emperor ranking. Wanted to replant the divine would be able to walk between his eyebrows from the Azura hell. The divine spirit mark he had planted earlier had already been used. I have a feeling Tathagata is plotting something against you. However, don't worry and return. How domineering. With my divine spirit mark, to injure I'll be notified immediately if he makes a single sword strike. I'll be able to protect you no as wonder soon the as legendary heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven said the Qi Hongtian emperor wasn't worthy in the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven. It seems like the really isn't worthy of make a move on the young everyone's eyes during the Devata realm's battle of the geniuses. Soon after, he'll be severely heavenly emperors if he palace masters of the tidal temple's sub-palaces arrived. However, not many people paid attention to them since everyone's attention was on Feng Qingyang earlier. Even with the help of a rare treasure, it'll take at least 100 years for him to fully recover. From today onward, as long as I'm nearby, I don't think he'll make a move on you. Dare to interfere in the matter between me and Situ Zhuqing, you'll die. After parting ways with Feng Qingyang stared at Zhou Bingwu, the heavenly emperor of in the heavenly palace of the primeval heaven where the young geniuses who were participating in the Devadatta realms battle of the geniuses were staying. Qingyang's words confused everyone. Many young geniuses were gathered outside the wooden huts, heavenly emperor discussing of the Luo River heaven not going to die soon. The eyes of the young geniuses brightened when they saw River died. Even if the Qi Hongtian emperor wanted to interfere in the legendary heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven, he would not be able to do anything about it. Rumor has it that he's as strong as a two-star god of war. When Qingyang spoke, they found out the reason behind strength, but the gray-clad young man next to him who's skilled in the law of death is at least a three-star god of war. After suppressing the heavenly emperor, the gray-clad young man is Lin Jueyun turned to look at He came here with the people who had an unsightly expression on her face as he said, according to the people from Feng Qingtian's just because your sub-soul is residing in the immortal stronger than a three-star god of war. Upon hearing Feng Qingyang's words, does this mean Lin Jueyun, including Duan Ling four-star god of war, finally understood what was going on? After Duan Ling Tian made his appearance, the atmosphere in the square became as it turned out, even after Duan in her true returned to his wooden hut, many people were still discussing him. Many people will challenge this disciple of the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven in the third round of the Devadatta realms battle of the geniuses. Although it's not as strong as a clone, we'll be able to see how strong he is. If one doesn't examine it with their divine consciousness, they won't be able to want to challenge him. It seems like the rumors are true. To see the battle between as it turns out, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven is not in her true form, but a clone of the immortal compliant for him? 3 days later, is a list of treasure even in the Devadatta realms. The vice palace master of the main hall of the title for the heavenly emperor who was in charge of the Devadatta realms to have a divine geniuses appeared in the sky above the Devadatta realms battle of the geniuses and looked at Feng Qingyang grimly as she said, many people were looking at the words on the list. Even if you've attained the 300 people not who advanced to the second round of the Devadatta realms battle of the geniuses are as follows. When the spatial tunnel between the realms of gods and the Devadatta realms at the end of each name, 300 there was at least some information about the Devadatta realms, indicating that the young genius was from a certain Devadatta realm. If you insist on fighting me whose identities were clear, they even get away with their identities. Situ Zhuqing even the strength they had displayed so far was useless for her to back down now, so she decided to use information after Duan Ling Tian's name. A god from the realms of solitary destructive heaven. As soon as the true disciple finished speaking, an uproar broke out among the crowd of the solitary destructive heaven. Expected her to say such a thing. Slightly over 600 years old. The heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven was a god from the realms of battle of the geniuses. Although most people knew his strength is suspected to be at least a two-star of the Luo River heaven. For example, daughter, they did not know the father of her daughter. Moreover, the father of her daughter had always been a mystery. He's only slightly over 600 years old. That the heavenly emperor of another Devadatta realm of the Devadatta realms battle of the geniuses had an affair with the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven and had given birth to her daughter. For example, naturally, there was a line of information after the Luo River heaven had 2 daughters. He's from Feng Qingtian. The other daughter had been killed by Duan to be at least a 3-star god of war in the second round of the Devadatta realms battle of the geniuses. There were more than 300 names, by your true which meant that there were more than 300 lines. Is his biological daughter. Some people's introductions were even longer, threateningly. Even those upon with a photographic memory would have to look at it for a while. Everyone turned to look at Feng Qingyang really detailed. Although Feng Qingyang has become a god by Su Li, he has only recently ascended to information about him since the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven's man is from the realms of gods. He seems like the tidal temple intentionally recorded this information might not be a match for him. It's obvious. I didn't expect the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven's man to be a god from the realms of gods. The true disciple of the heavenly emperor introducing the third true disciple of Gongsun killed the daughter of a god. Meanwhile, Duan from the yellow narrowed his eyes slightly. He was the third true disciple of Gongsun, the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven of the yellow yuan who was her husband. He had killed a 3-star god of war and was suspected to be intimidated after hearing the heavenly emperor of the Luo River heaven. He had only revealed the strength of a 2-star god of war. Merely looked at Situ Zhuqing indifferently and said, "So what?" The 4th true disciple of Gongsun finished speaking. The heavenly emperor of the yellow yuan rays shot out of his body and in the yellow yuan heaven. He was the 4th true disciple of Gongsun Shenyuan. the heavenly emperor of the Yellow Yuan Heaven. Many people felt their hearts ache when they saw this scene. He had been injured by Duan Lingtian. Although the immortal compliant wood was precious, his strength was close to that of a two-star god of war, the heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. The title temple is clearly the heavenly palace of the solitary destructive heaven had said with a frown on his face. Would as well. Su Li smiled mockingly. Immortal compliant would only grow in places with he did not expect the people from the title temple would be so senseless. The heavenly palace of a Devata realm was many people in the surroundings that had a supreme grade's introduction and couldn't help but laugh. Their laughter was filled with ridicule. Chapter in the crowd, Duan Lingtian noticed the heavenly palace of Qi Hong that was filled with hatred. Damn it! And he instinctively raised his head to look over. Had always with a glance, he saw the robust young man staring at him from afar because the extremely Emperor knew her man was a god. It was none other than Tong Tuesday. Tong Tu was the fourth true disciple of the heavenly emperor of the Yellow Yuan Heaven. Naturally, at that time, her man was obsessed with her with a calm expression on his face. After her man left, he never returned. After all, when he saw Duan had a family in a realm of gods, he smiled and nodded at him. She was, at most, just a lover he had met while he was roaming the realms of gods. For this reason, the Qi Hongtian Emperor, Chapter 34, had taken her in because he knew she had a relationship with a god. From the mysterious Wonder Heaven, she did not expect her man would not give her any face, even though she had used the divine his gaze away from the two true disciples of the heavenly emperor of the Shenyuan heavenly solitary destructive heaven. He followed Su Li's gaze destroyed her divine wishful would clone as soon as he made a move. Mysterious Wonder Heaven, and based on his performance in the first round of the Devata realms battle of geniuses, at this moment, he was suspected to be a two-star god of war. As there was no other information about him. The hairpin on her head had been broken at some point in time, rather mysterious, and a terrifying power was wreaking havoc around her body. It did not cross Duan Lingtian's mind that the young man who approached him as if they were close the first time they met actually had such extraordinary strength. Had the slightest bit of grace and demeanor of an expert at all. She looked like Duan Lingtian noticed that when he swept his gaze over the 300 names, connecting the realms of gods to the Devata realms, they were suspected to have the strength of a four-star daughter, even if he doesn't care about. None of them said they were suspected to have the strength of a five-star god with hatred and anger. None of them are suspected to be five-star gods of war. She raised her hand and took out another hairpin and tied it into her hair. Five-star gods of war among the people who are suspected to be four-star gods of war or stronger. Where was the crazy appearance that they haven't revealed their strength yet? In the next instant, perhaps there's no one in the same generation who's worthy of them making a move, who was also the former holy maiden of the Luo River sect. Of course, let's immediately believe that someone has seen them display their strengths, but that person is either dead or didn't spread the news. Since Feng Qingyang, no one knows their strength. Emperor of the solitary destructive heaven and knew she was brought up this topic. The sky above the Devata realms battle of geniuses became lively. After the Devata realms battle of the geniuses ended, he might come looking for her in the heavenly palace of Qi called out to Su Li before the two of them body was targeted by Feng. On their way back, she didn't think that she would be able to survive. Tang Sanpao said with a sullen expression on his face, "Why didn't you call me when you went to look at the name list? After 400 years, that's too much, you can still be as unyielding as you are today." Either. When Sidu Zhuqing brought Feng Jianyu out of Qi Hongtian's heavenly emperor palace, then she said goodbye and left. Although she looked calm on the surface, and Su Li returned to their respective wooden houses and waited for the third round of the Devata of the Luo River Heaven battle to begin. She was not the kind of person who was willing to live in seclusion. Compared to the first and second rounds of the Devata realms genius battle, she wouldn't have competed for the Devata realms heavenly emperor of the Luo River Heaven. Time flew by like a white steed of the legendary heavenly emperor of the solitary destructive heaven. The third round of the Devata realms for her to return to the Luo was about to begin, but she also did not dare to reveal her whereabouts for fear of being in the previous round would be challenged by the 700 people who were eliminated in the previous round. At the venue of the Devata realms from the 700 people who had been eliminated, many of the 300 people who had advanced to the next round were also looking through the list compiled by the title temple to see if there was anyone they could deal with. Zhuqing's immortal these people either didn't have much confidence in themselves the hearts of everyone present to tremble would eliminate them. The heavenly emperors since they were prepared in Devata realms, even if they were eliminated, they still had a chance to turn things around. As expected of someone who came from the Devata realms genius battle, not only would the 700 people who were eliminated in the previous round have a chance to challenge someone else, in the face of godly 300 people who were eliminated today, even though he has just become a challenge someone else. Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang's heart is truly admirable, but the number of people would change because of his fearless heart that he's able to achieve no one challenged in such a short time. Although the third round of the Devata Realms Genius Battle
but very
is divided
few people
into
were
10
capable of
battles
doing
at the
so.
same time,
Back then,
I'm afraid
when
it'll
Feng
take a few
Qingyang
days.
was being hunted down in the
Tang
Azure
Sanpao
Hell,
muttered to himself,
if it were any other celestial emperor, they would have fought with their lives on the
Duan
line
Lingtian
instead of
and the
fleeing
others
to the
were
Azure
still
Hell.
sitting in the same
After all,
seats they had
if
been
one did
sitting
not
in a
become
month
a
ago.
god, one
Apart
would
from
definitely
them,
die
even
in the Azure
who
Hell.
was eliminated
This
in
was
the
an
second round
ironclad
had
rule.
come. In
Even
fact,
a godly being would
was
not dare
already
to enter
mentally
the Azure
prepared
Hell
for his
fear of
elimination
death.
in the second round.
Legend had it
In
that
fact,
only
he
supreme
knew he would not be
powerhouses
able to
could
go
enter the
far
Azure
in the
Hell
Devata
as they
Realms
wished.
Genius Battle.
Naturally,
He had
these
only
were
come
only
because
legends.
he wanted to see the best
Only the
young
supreme
geniuses
powerhouses
from the
knew
various
the truth.
Devata realms.
After killing
Moreover,
Situ Zhuqing's
such
clone,
an opportunity
Feng
was hard to
Qingyang
come
led
by.
Meng Luo,
Ordinary
the heavenly
people would
emperor
not
of the
be
Luo
able to
River
come
heaven,
and watch
to
the
the small
battles.
floating island
In fact,
where the heavenly
He
emperor
was
of the
not the
primeval
only
heaven
one who
was
had
seated.
such thoughts.
Ding Fu,
At this moment,
the heavenly
there were
emperor
still
of the
more than
primeval
2,000
heaven,
young
did not
geniuses
invite
present.
the heavenly emperors
Whether it
of
was
the other
the
Devata
1,000
realms
people
to
who were
sit with him.
eliminated or the
Based on this,
1,000 people
one
who were
could see how
eliminated
much he
today,
valued Feng
all of them
Qingyang.
were present.
Winged
Sush,
celestial
under
emperor,
everyone's watchful
Ding
eyes,
Fu,
Su
rarely
Konghai,
admire
the
anyone in my
vice-palace
life.
master of the tidal
Today,
temple's
I
main
admire
hall,
you,
appeared in the
said
sky
as he
above
gave
the
Feng
Devata
Qingyang a
realms
thumbs
genius
up.
battle
If
like
he
a
were
ghost.
in Situ Zhuqing's
After a
shoes,
few moments,
he would not
turned
dare to
around
offend
and
her
looked at
after
the
learning
crowd.
she had a godly
Today,
being
the
in a
third
realm of
round
gods.
of the Devata realms
After all,
genius battle
the
will
spatial
begin.
tunnel between
The
the Devata
300
realms
people
and
who
the
have
realms of
advanced to the
gods was
fourth
not
round will be
always
confirmed.
closed. Every
This round
10,000
is
years,
different from the
the
previous
spatial
round.
tunnel would be
You
closed
can only
for
rely
1,000
on
years.
yourself and not
The
others.
passage had been
Those
closed
who
for
relied
almost
on others
600
in the second
years.
round won't
In
be
another
able to rely
400
on
years,
luck in this
the
round
passage
since between the
between
realms of
battle.
gods and the
I'm
Devata
sure all
realms
of you
would
have already
reopen.
heard about the
At
rules,
that time,
so I won't
the gods
waste my
from
breath.
the realms of gods would
At
be
the
able
same
to
time,
descend to the
Su
Devata
Konghai
realms,
raised his hand,
and the people from the
Suddenly,
Devata realms
rows
would
of
be able to
densely
travel
packed
to the
words
realms
appeared
of
in
gods.
the air above him.
Naturally,
They were the
godly
300
beings and
names that had
celestials from the
disappeared a few
Devata
days
realms
ago,
rarely
as well as
traveled
the
to the
introductions
realms of
behind the
gods.
names.
After all,
This formation
celestials
mirror
from the
image is
Devata realms
controlled
would
by a
not be
person from the
noticed in the
tidal
realms
temple.
of gods.
It can
and they
erase
might
the
even
names of those
encounter
who have been
danger.
defeated
On
and
the other
replace
hand,
them with the names
godly
of those
beings
who
from
have
the realms of
succeeded.
gods were not
Everyone
allowed to
has
kill
3 chances to
indiscriminately in the
challenge the
Devata
4th
realms,
round of the Devata
especially the
realms
heavenly
battle of the
emperors of the
geniuses.
Devata realms.
If you're
and the
unable
people
to
from the
challenge
tidal
the
temple.
4th round after
This was
3
a rule
times,
set by
you
the
won't be
supreme
able to advance
powerhouses.
to the 4th
If a
round.
godly being
As
from
soon
the
as
realms
Su
of gods
Konghai
dared to
finished
make a
speaking,
move,
many
they would
young
be punished
geniuses
by the
turned to look
supreme
at the rows of
powerhouses.
names. In the past,
heavenly
the
emperors
servant
and
of the
high-ranking
Yun clan
officials
from the realms
from the
of gods
various
dared to
Devata
make a
realms
move
who
on
had not
Feng
seen the
Qingyang
list
because he
before
was
were
only a
also looking at
demigod
it.
and had yet
There's
to
no
become
one
a
who
god.
seems to be a
Therefore,
five-star
he
god
did
of
not
war.
violate the rules
It
set
seems
by
like
the
all the
supreme
young
powerhouses
geniuses
have hidden
For
their
example,
strength well this
Yun
time.
Qingyan,
Based
the
on
great
past
young master of the
experiences,
Yun
the
clan
Devata
in the divine
realms
offering
offering
land
the geniuses
did not
is
dare to
always
make a
the
move
most
on
exciting.
Feng Qingyang.
Many young geniuses who haven't had the
Feng
chance to
Qingyang
show off their
smiled
skills will
faintly
be
and
able to
shook his
do
head
so
in
this
response
time.
to Ding Fu's flattery.
I'm looking forward to
You
it.
flatter me,
Most
old
of the
brother
heavenly
Ding.
emperors present
At
on
this
the
moment,
scene had
Feng
participated
Qingyang
in the
was still
Devata
the center
realms
of
battle
attention.
of the geniuses.
Duan Lingtian,
It was obvious they
Senior
were
Feng
looking
Qingyang
forward to
is
the
really
upcoming
powerful.
Devata realms
You're
battle
really
of the
lucky
geniuses.
to be his
true disciple. At this moment, apart from
At this
Duan
moment,
Lingtian,
Su
Tang
Konghai's voice
Sanpao,
rang
who was
in the air
standing
again.
behind Duan
Now,
Lingtian
the
looked
10
at
of you,
Feng Qingyang
state
with
your
a burning
target.
gaze.
Even
Soon as
Su
Su was no
Konghai
longer
said
as
this,
calm as
a
before.
person immediately
Moreover,
flew out and
he had
arrived
spent
in the
some time
sky
with
above
Feng
the arena.
Qingyang.
He
With
looked
Feng
directly
Qingyang's
at the
guidance,
3 people
he had
sitting
learned
together
a
in
lot
the
about the
spectator
sword
seats
Dao,
and sneered.
and his strength had improved a
Huang
lot.
Bin of Spirit
All he had to do
overarching
now was
heaven
wait for the
challenged
Devata
Qiu
realms
Yunjin
battle of the geniuses to begin.
The 3
When
people's
the next
expressions
heavenly
darkened
emperor who
when they
was
heard
ranked in the
Huang
top
Bin's
10
words.
on the heavenly emperor
The
ranking
3
appeared,
of you defeated me in
everyone's
the previous
attention
round,
finally
but you
shifted
don't
away
dare to
from
challenge
Feng
me
Qingyang.
now.
It's
Huang
Huang
Bin
Bin
sneered when he saw the
heavenly
person he
emperor
had
of the
targeted
jade
did not
emperor
make a
heaven.
move.
The person who
remember
attracted everyone's
At this
attention
moment,
was none
a young
other than Yu
genius Hao among the spectators, the heavenly emperor of the Jade Emperor Heaven. Men. Many among people the three in the Jade Emperor Heaven addressed him as the Jade Emperor, as a titled celestial emperor, while the other two are titled celestial to look in the direction of the Jade Emperor Heaven's heavenly emperor displayed earlier. With just a glance, he's one of the strongest one-star gods of war, the heavenly emperor of the Jade Emperor Heaven. The heavenly emperor of the Jade Emperor defeated him in a 3-on-1 well-built, middle-aged man. His revenge came so quickly. Was as fair as jade. Is he challenging the non-titled celestial emperor, or one of the other two celestial Jade Emperor Heaven was ranked if I were him, I'd definitely send the non-titled celestial emperor to challenge Duan Ling Tian. Amidst the commotion, he was a figure from the ancient voice and legends on Earth, where he lived in his past life. If you don't enter the ring with some of the ancient myths and legends, you'll be deemed to have admitted defeat. The Jade Emperor did not seem to have any dermic powers to consider. For example, in Journey to the West, one of the young men Jade Emperor did not make a move when Sun Wukong wreaked havoc in the heavenly palace. Emperor, But
However,
you dare to challenge
Duan
me?
Lingtian had
I'm
a
not
feeling
even
the
a
Jade
title
Emperor was more than just an embroidered
How
pillow
shameless
since
of
he
you.
was able to become
Huang
the
Bin
master
said
of the heavenly
nonchalantly.
court.
What a joke.
Now that the Jade
If you're
Emperor was
so
ranked
shameless,
8th on the
why
heavenly
did you
emperor
join
ranking,
forces to
it was clear
eliminate
he
me
was
in the
stronger
previous
than
round?
Sun Wukong.
The challenge
heavens
ended
equal
when
the
the
person
celestial
who was
emperor,
challenged did
the
not
man
dare
with
to
3
challenge
eyes
Huang
behind
Bin.
the heavenly
Huang
emperor
Bin
of the Jade
successfully
Emperor
advanced
must
to the
be
next
the famous
round.
3-eyed
His name
celestial
also
emperor,
replaced
Yang
that
Jian.
person's name and hung
Soon
in the
after,
air.
clearly
Clearly
noticed the
appearing
young
before
man
everyone's
standing
eyes.
behind Yu Haotian.
If I could
The
challenge
young man
only
had a
one
cold
person,
expression on
I'd have
his face.
defeated all 3
He
of
was
you.
dressed in
Huang
silver
Bin looked
armor,
at the 3
and his
people
eyes
coldly
were sharp.
before he left the
There was a
arena
vertical
and said
eye
coldly,
between his eyebrows,
"Of course,
making
if you have
him
the
look
guts,
rather
you can
strange.
challenge me again
Erlang
after you're
Shin Yang
eliminated."
Jian, I'll welcome
Duan
you with open
Lingtian's
arms.
heart trembled. As
He
soon
did
as
not
he finished
expect to
speaking,
meet the
he
2
left the
legendary
arena.
figures
The
from his
3
previous
people were
life's
naturally
hometown, Earth.
infuriated
I
by
wonder if
Huang
Sun
Bin's
Wukong
words.
will come?
After
Normally,
Huang Bin left
he
the
wouldn't
stage,
come,
he didn't
right?
forget to say to the
Duan
audience in a
Lingtian
clear
thought to
voice,
himself,
"Everyone,
while
if you want to
Duan
challenge
Lingtian
someone,
was still
you can
in a
choose
daze.
one of those 2
A cry
people.
rang in the air.
Choose as you wish."
His eyes
Their
widened in
strength
shock.
is only at the level of
It's
a normal
Tefagata,
1-star
the
war
hall
god.
master of the title
Huang
temple's
Bin's
branch
words infuriated the 3
heaven.
people even more.
Duan Lingtian was
After
taken
Huang Bin
aback
left
when
the
he heard the
arena,
voice.
there were indeed
When he
people
looked over
who
again,
challenged
he
the other
saw a
2
tall
out of the
and
3.
sturdy young
They
monk dressed in a
successfully
purple
defeated
gold
them
kasai
and
and
leading a
replaced them.
few old monks in
Thank
the
you,
air.
brother
The
Huang
people
Bin.
around him addressed him
thank
as
you, brother.
Tefagata. The 2
He's
people who
Tefagata?
successfully
Is
challenged
he
Huang Bin
Tefagata Buddha?
smiled and thanked
Duan
him from afar.
Lingtian was filled with
Naturally,
questions.
this was
Soon
only
after,
a small interlude.
someone answered his question.
The number of people in
I
the
heard
arena
Tefagata,
remained at the
10.
hall master of
10
the
people
title
would
temple's
challenge
branch
the
in
other
the
10
Shen
people.
Yuan heaven.
After
Used
the
to be a
battle
powerful
ended,
figure
2
in the
people
Jade
would leave
Emperor
the
heaven.
arena and
He was
another
invited
person
by
would
the
challenge
title
the
temple
others.
to be the hall
After
master
about
of the
15
title
minutes,
temple's
a
branch
young
in the
man
Shen
dressed
Yuan
in a
heaven.
brown-yellow long robe
I've heard
stood
about
in
that
the
as
air.
well.
It
His
said he
gaze
was
landed
invited
on
to be the
Duan
hall
Lingtian
master of
and
the
the
title
others before
temple
he
in the Shen
finally
Yuan
locked his
heaven
gaze
because he's
on
good
one
friends
person.
with the heavenly emperor of the
Si
Shen
Kong
Yuan
Yufang,
heaven.
Qin Chi Tian, challenge Wang Ting of the solitary destructive
Chapter
heaven. Wang Ting
3458.
sat behind Duan
It said that the
Lingtian,
great sun
and although her
celestial
expression
emperor
didn't change when
Tefagata,
faced
the
with the
heavenly
challenge,
emperor
her
of the
gaze
Shen
became
Yuan heaven,
slightly more
and the
serious.
heavenly emperor of the
It was
Jade
obvious
Emperor
she was
heaven came
mentally
from the
prepared
same
for this
mundane realm.
If that's true, then isn't the mundane realm
this
there
Wang
in
Ting
the woman who
heaven-defying?
had a breakthrough
Of
in the
course.
first round? It's one of the
It's
legendary
her.
mundane
As
realms
soon as
in
Wang
the
Ting
Devata
stood
realms.
up and stepped into
I think
the
it's
air,
called the Yen
many
Huang
people
realm.
recognized her.
Yen Huang realm. If there's a chance, I'll have to go and take a look. You can go and take a look, but don't
Chapter
cause any trouble.
3468.
If you dare to make a
During
move
the
on
first
Yen
round
Huang
of the
realm
Devata
like the
realms
Luo
battle
River
of the
Heaven's
geniuses,
Emperors, you'll
there were a
definitely
few
die.
people
who had broken through
Although
during
the
the
discussions
battle.
of the surrounding
Therefore,
people were not
most of the
loud,
young
with
geniuses
Duan
present
Lingtian's
at that
hearing,
time had
he
paid
could still
attention
hear
to
them
them
clearly.
Why didn't
It
I
was
think
also
of
because
challenging
of
those
this
that
who
he
had
was
just broken
completely
through?
certain?
A
The
young
hall
genius
master
who had
of the
just
Shen
broken
Yuan
through
heaven
said
title temple's
regretfully,
branch.
"If I had
The great
challenged one of them,
celestial
I wouldn't have
emperor
had to
Tefagata
fight so
was
hard
the same
earlier."
Tefagata
Even
that
if
he
they
knew.
have the strength
Soon,
of a titled
the heavenly
celestial
emperor
emperor
of Shen
there
Yuan
must be a
arrived as
limit
well.
to their strength.
It was obvious that the Jade
guy is
Emperor
really
Heaven's
smart.
Emperor,
The
he
great
actually
sun
chose to
celestial
challenge the
emperor
only
Tefagata,
woman among
and
the
the
few
Shen
who
Yuan
had just
heavenly
broken
emperor
through.
had come together.
It's obvious that
Otherwise,
Wang Ting is
they
a
wouldn't have
pushover
shown
in his
up
one
eyes.
after another. Similar
Under the
discussions
watchful
could be
eyes of
heard
the
in the
crowd,
spectator
the
seats.
3 of them gathered
The
on
people
the
who had
same
just
floating
broken through
island.
during the first round of the
Gongsun
Devata
Shen Yuan.
realms battle of the
Duan
geniuses
Lingtian's
had
gaze quickly
also
fell on
attracted
the
a
heavenly
lot of
emperor
attention.
of the Shen Yuan
Some
heaven.
people even
He was
began
also
to
looking
inquire about
forward
their
to meeting
names
this
and former
former
opponent of his master.
Naturally,
A
there were
legendary
also some
figure
people
from
who
the
had heard
ancient
about the
myths
names
and
and
legends
origins
of his
of the
previous
few
life
people
who
on
had
Earth.
just broken through
Now
during the
he
first
finally
round
saw
of the
it.
Devata realm.
After the 3
Swoosh.
heavenly emperors
Following
of the
the
Jade
defeat
Emperor
of
heaven
one person
arrived,
and the
more
successful
heavenly
advancement
emperors
of another
arrived
person,
one after another.
a ghost-like figure
However,
flashed
since
out
the
from
heavenly
the Eastern
emperors
spectator
ranked in the
stands
top
and
10
quickly
on the
called out a
heavenly
challenge,
emperor ranking
and
of
the person
Devata
he
realms
challenged
were
was
present,
also
also the person who had made of ordinary heavenly emperors did not attract much attention until another heavenly heard his name was called top 10. However, heavenly emperor ranking of Devata realms arrived. He's really the heavenly emperor of the Wansho heaven. There's one less person. Sixth on the heavenly emperor ranking, cursed. Di Huang. Just as Wang Ting entered the arena, is from the Qilin clan. Even fight with the person who challenged her. The another person in the arena was defeated. He was born another person of chaos, divine flame. Dozens of figures flashed out from the spectator seats. I've seen the man behind heavenly emperor straight to the arena. What a joke. He's the patriarch of the Qilin clan, two people who had just broken through during the first round of the Devata realm. The one who attracted everyone's attention if they did not hurry up, then the 10,000 beast heaven's heavenly emperor person. The primal chaos out of the dozens of figures, only the fastest person entered the arena. Sixth on the heavenly monarch flying by Moreover, he was one of the few people in the Devata realms. They felt as if they were slowly being pushed back to the top of the spectator seats by waves of gods would be tempted by the 5 divine elements. Damn it, let alone the people in the Devata realms so fast. There were many people who were stronger than Di Huang in the Devata realms, unsightly but none of them dared to snatch the chaos divine flame from her body. The arena first. It was all because the Kirin clan had a complacent smile on his face. Once something happened to Di Huang, he immediately opened his mouth and said that he wanted to challenge the last person who had made a breakthrough in the first round and had not yet entered the arena on Di Huang's body. A loud noise rang that tried to kill Di Huang, attracting everyone's attention. Supreme expert in just a blink of an eye. Because of this, the young genius who had challenged the primal divine heavily injured one of the 5 divine elements, exchanging dozens of blows to snatch it from him because they were all afraid of the supreme expert from the Qilin clan behind him. Wang Ting's supreme beings were existences above the realms of gods. Wang Ting, even the most powerful gods would be killed with just a flick of his finger. Let alone people from the Devata realms. No matter how powerful a title celestial emperor, the young man glared hatefully at god of war before he left by a supreme expert with just a flick of his finger. When she heard this, and she slowly walked away by herself before returning to the seat behind divine flame, one of the 5 divine elements. Many people who had regained their senses looked at Wang Ting's eyes as he looked at Di Huang. Wang Ting has just broken through a month ago and she has such to conceal the aura of the 5 divine elements. She's not simple indeed. He would have been discovered by Di Huang. Even among the 1-star war gods, Di Huang could not snatch the 5 divine elements from Duan Lingtian. I thought she was a pushover, but it looks like we underestimated her from the Qilin clan to snatch the 5 divine elements from Duan Lingtian. That city Yufang from before was also injured by her because he was careless. For the supreme if he didn't care if he made would at least be able to fight. Nobody to a draw with Duan Lingtian was thinking at this moment. Strength was if beyond someone knew everyone's expectations. They would definitely laugh even their heads Duan Lingtian did not because it was common knowledge that a supreme strength when she had just protected a descendant that he was valued stronger than the average 1-star gods of war. But he would not care too much about other things. You're amazing. As long as the Qilin clan was not destroyed and a descendant of his or her clan was not killed, to have such strength when you've just broken through. More people died. It seems like you'll be able to enter the for example. I think it will be difficult. The heavenly emperor although of the 10,000 had won a battle and was not challenged, the supreme she was not very confident. Qilin clan would definitely she knew the geniuses in the Devata realms if the patriarch of the Qilin clan was the only one who died, even if her strength was not bad among the 1-star gods of war, even if the supreme expert did not enter the 4th round. Di Huang, the heavenly emperor of the 10,000 to be on par with mine definitely just broken through. Everyone was wary of Zhang Tianyu, who was sitting on the other side he would provoke the supreme help but sigh. Although the supreme expert from the Qilin clan cared about Di Huang's safety, he would not interfere with Di Huang's growth. It would most likely help him snatch the 5 divine elements from others. Since Wang Ting showed her strength earlier, the supreme expert would not do such a thing. With her in the first round did not hold back at all. The supreme experts were too powerful. Even if they had selfish motives, they still had a bottom line for who had broken through in the first round did not dare to be emperor of the 10,000 beasts with all their might. There were also heavenly emperors who were defeated his opponent in 10 on the heavenly emperor defeated his opponent in 30 among the heavenly emperors who were ranked in the top 10 of the heavenly emperor ranking. The most eye-catching ones were the 2 heavenly emperors who were ranked first and second on the heavenly emperor ranking. Naturally, this was only the first challenge to Wang Ting. One could imagine there would be others who would challenge Wang Ting in the future. If the person ranked second on the heavenly emperor ranking in the Devata realms doesn't display his godlike strength from the solitary destructive heaven emperor from the solitary destructive heaven, a young man dressed like a scholar stood in the middle of the field and looked at Duan Lingtian from afar before he issued a challenge to Duan Lingtian to have attained godhood. For a moment, the now group of young geniuses who were originally paying attention to the battle between the other 18 people shifted their gazes. To them, if the heavenly emperor of the great desolation was more attractive that he's a god, currently he'll be replaced among the other 18 people who were fighting. The strongest one was only even if the second-ranked 1-star god emperor of the great desolation heaven proves his war had made a move yet. He'll still be ranked third on the heavenly emperor ranking since he's ranked behind. Someone actually dares to challenge Duan Lingtian. There's only one way for him to return to the second-ranked heavenly emperor of the great desolation heaven, and that's to defeat god of war. Finally, when Heaven Emperor Ji God of War has made a move, who was ranked first on the Heavenly Monarch ranking, and Heaven Emperor Ji the first round of the Devata realms battle of the Heavenly Monarch was enough to determine the strength of the titled Celestial Emperor. The Heavenly Emperor of the great desolation would be able to maintain an early middle-aged man with the entire battle. Even the name list released by the title temple showed Duan Lingtian's strength was suspected to be at least a 2-star god of Heavenly Emperor Feng. Duan Lingtian, like you'll replace me on the Heavenly Emperor ranking after today.
Luo
Heavenly
Sanpao
Emperor
laughed heartily.
If you want the ranking,
Up until now,
you can take it back at any time.
geniuses from the Devata
Feng
realms
Qingyang
and
said with a
high-ranking
faint
officials
smile
from the
on his
branches of the
face.
Devata
The
realms
eyes of
did
the
not
others
pay
lit
much
up when they
attention
heard
to the
the conversation
conversation
between the two heavenly
Most of them were
emperors.
chatting with the
Could
people
it be
around
that
them
these
and
two
occasionally
heavenly emperors
glancing
were
at the
still
duel.
preparing to have
This
a
was because they
world-shocking
did not
showdown?
think there was anything worth paying
I don't
attention
really
to.
care.
At the
Kong
very
Ji,
least,
the
that was
heavenly
the case
emperor
for the
of the
time
great
being.
desolation
Now
heaven
that someone had
laughed
challenged Duan
nonchalantly.
Ling Tian,
After
the
he
heavenly
finished
emperors
speaking,
and
he looked at
high-ranking
Feng
officials
Qingyang
from the
meaningfully
title
before
temple's
he
branches
said,
stopped
Heavenly
chatting
Emperor Feng,
and shifted their
I'm
attention
afraid
to
the title
Duan Ling
temple
Tian.
is going to
In
interfere
just
with
a
your
blink of an
promotion
eye,
to the heavenly
Duan Ling
emperor
Tian
of the
had become
solitary
the center of
destructive heaven.
attention.
Now that you've
Brother
revealed your
Feng,
god-level
I didn't expect
cultivation
someone to
base.
challenge junior
After
nephew
he finished
Duan
speaking,
so soon.
he glanced at the
Ding
hall
Fu,
masters
the
of the
heavenly
title
emperor
temple
of the
who were more
primeval
powerful
heaven,
and had a
looked at
higher
Feng
status
Qingyang
in the
who was
title
sitting
temple.
opposite him and
A
said with a
mocking
smile
expression appeared
based
on
on the
his
current
face.
situation.
Upon
It seems
hearing
like this
Kong Ji's
person
words,
is here to test
Feng
junior
Qingyang
nephew
said
Duan.
nonchalantly,
In
"All
that
right,
case,
I'm
Feng
looking forward to the
nodded.
powerhouses
At
from
the
the
same
title
time,
temple
he
coming to
withdrew
drag
his
me down."
gaze and picked up
The
the
title
fragrant
temple
tea
did
on the
not
table.
allow a god to
After
become the
taking a
heavenly
sip,
emperor
he put down
of
the
the Devata
teacup
realm.
and lowered his head
However,
as if he was
if they
thinking
wanted to
about
drag a
something
god
else.
down,
They
Ding
would
Fu
usually
did not
send a
disturb him.
god-level
His
powerhouse
eyes
to
were
compete
trained
with them.
on Duan Ling
After
Tian
that,
as he
the
watched
god-level
Duan Ling
powerhouse
Tian
would
leave the
become the
spectator
heavenly
seat
emperor
and enter
of
the
the
Devata
Devata
realm.
Make your
After
move.
that, the
Under the
god-level
watchful eyes of
powerhouse
the
would
others,
step down
Duan
and
Ling
allow
Tian
other
looked at
titled
Sima
celestial
Zhongjing,
emperors to
who was
compete
dressed
for the
like a
position.
scholar, and said
Naturally,
indifferently,
the condition
Duan
was that the
Ling Tian is a
god-level
two-star god
powerhouse
of
sent
war.
by the title
Duan
temple
Ling
was stronger
Tian,
than the
I know
original
you're also
heavenly
a two-star
emperor
god
of the
of war.
Devata realm
The
who had
reason I
already
challenged
become
you
a god.
today is because I'm
It seems
curious
like
about the
heavenly
true
emperor
disciple
Feng
of the
Qingyang is
legendary
very
heavenly
confident.
emperor of the
I'll wait and
solitary
see.
destructive heaven.
Feng Qingyang's
As soon
words
as
stunned
Sima
Kong
Zhongjing
Ji
for a
finished
moment
speaking,
before he regained
flames
his
burst
senses.
out of his body.
However,
It was
if
clear
one were
he
to
had
take a
comprehended
closer
the
look,
law of fire.
one would be able to
Boom.
see that there was
Sima
a look of
Zhongjing
shock in the
seemed to have
depths of Kong
transformed
Ji's
into a
eyes.
fireball as
It was
he
clear
shot
he did
toward
not
Duan Ling
expect
Tian.
Feng Qingyang
At the
or
same
Duan
time,
Ling
he
Tian to be
merged
so
his
confident.
celestial origin
Many of the
energy with
palace
the fusion
masters from the
profundity
title
and
temple's
cast the
branches
fusion
in the
profundity.
Devata realms
It
frowned as
transformed
they
into a
looked at
dragon that
Feng
opened its
Qingyang
mouth
coldly.
and charged
The
toward Duan
legendary
Ling Tian.
heavenly emperor of the
Just
solitary
as Sima
destructive heavens
Zhongjing
had
attack
become
was
a
about
god
to
not
land
long
on
ago,
Duan Ling Tian,
and yet he
Duan
was
Ling
so
Tian
arrogant
vanished from his spot.
It seemed like it was time to teach
Teleportation.
him a lesson.
In the next moment,
Duan Ling Tian
sonorous
reappeared
voice
behind
rang in the
Sima
air as
Zhongjing.
Tathagata,
The great sun
as soon as
celestial
Duan Ling
emperor
Tian
rose
appeared
to his
before
feet.
everyone's eyes,
He joined his
the
palms
sound of a
together
sword
as he looked at
whistling
Feng
in the air
Qingyang
rang in
and
the
said,
air.
After the
After
Devata
that,
realm's
everyone
battle
saw
of the
a streak
geniuses
of
ends,
blood spurting
I'll
out
head
from
to
the
the
back
heavenly
of
palace
Sima
of the
Zhongjing's
solitary
neck.
destructive heaven
Sima
to fight the
Zhongjing
wind
broke out
heavenly
in cold
emperor.
sweat as he froze
Upon
on the
hearing
spot.
Tathagata's
After
words,
a moment,
an
he was
uproar
certain
broke
it was
out among the
only a
crowd.
superficial
Even
wound.
Duan Ling
He
Tian
hurriedly
was shocked
stopped
by
the bleeding and
Tathagata's
turned
words.
around.
When he looked at Duan Ling Tian
Almost
again,
everyone
a hint
present
of joy
understood the
could be
meaning
seen
behind
in his
Tathagata's words.
He bowed and
Palace
thanked Duan
Master
Ling
Tathagata
from the
thank
title
you for
temple's
showing
branch
mercy.
in the Xianyuan
Thank
heaven
you for
has
showing
also
mercy.
become a god. Sima
It's
Zhongjing's
obvious.
voice was
Otherwise,
trembling at this moment.
where did Palace
After
Master
all,
Tathagata
killing
get
was
the
not
courage to
prohibited
challenge
in
the
the
battle
heavenly
of the
emperor
geniuses
of the solitary
Devata
destructive
realms?
heaven? Even if Duan Ling
Heavens,
Tian had beheaded
another
Sima
god-level
Zhongjing,
powerhouse.
no one would blame
Everyone
him
was
for it.
shocked.
All
Ah,
right. At this
Duan
moment,
Ling
the
Tian
heavenly
nodded
emperor of the
indifferently,
Brahma heaven,
and then he
who
returned
was
to
ranked
his
first
seat
in
in
the
the spectating
spectating area
ranking
under
of
the
the
astonished
heavens,
gazes of
laughed
the
as
crowd.
he
looked at Feng Qingyang and Tathagata. Gentlemen, please let me know when you're going to fight. I want to witness your battle.
3469.
The heavenly emperor of
As
the
soon as
Brahma
Duan
heaven
Ling
had
Tian
been
returned to
confirmed
his
to have
seat,
become
the
a god
spectator
several
seats
that were
1,000 years
originally
ago.
deathly silent burst into an uproar again. What a fast sword! I only heard the sound of the sword whistling through the air, but I couldn't see any trace of the sword. Isn't this sword too ridiculously fast? I'm a 2-star god of war, but I couldn't see any trace of the sword at all. All the young geniuses were shocked. Even Yu Dongfang, the third true disciple of Gongsun Xianyuan, the heavenly emperor of the Xianyuan heaven, had a grave expression on his face. He did not see the sword either.
As for Tong Tu, who was standing next to Yudong Fong, he was so frightened that he broke out in cold sweat. He knew Duan Ling Tian had already shown him mercy. If Duan Ling Tian wanted to kill him, he could have killed him with just one strike even if he did not catch him off guard. Tong Tu could not even see through Duan Ling Tian's instantaneous movement, let alone see through Tong Tu's sword strike. Duan Ling Tian's cultivation base was higher than his. Based on the celestial origin energy Duan Ling Tian had used to teleport earlier, Tong Tu estimated that Duan Ling Tian's cultivation base was at least an 8 trigram celestial emperor or even a 9 palaces celestial emperor like his third senior brother. However, Tong Tu was only a 6 combination celestial emperor. He didn't use the fused profundity from the law of space, Yu Dongfang muttered. Tong Tu's expression changed. What? Tong Tu's expression changed drastically when he heard Yu Dongfang's words. He could see and feel Duan Lingtian's opponent had used the fused profundity from the law of fire earlier. However, his third senior brother was telling him that Duan Lingtian's opponent had used the fused profundity. Duan Lingtian did not use the fused profundity from the law of space earlier? How was that possible? Although the law of space was powerful and was one of the four supreme laws, it was not as heaven-defying as this. How could Duan Lingtian defeat his opponent without using the fused profundity? Was the difference in their cultivation bases that great? Is it because of the difference in their cultivation bases? Tong Tu's expression turned solemn. If I'm not mistaken, Duan Lingtian is already a 9 palaces celestial emperor. As for that person, he's also an 8 trigrams celestial emperor. He's only one level away from the 8 trigrams celestial emperor. Ordinary people who are skilled in the law of space won't be able to defeat him without fusing their profundities. Yu Dongfang judged. Then what right does he have? Tong Tu was a little puzzled. He racked his brains but still couldn't figure out what was going on. Have you forgotten what Master admires the most when he talks about Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang in the solitary destructive heaven? Yu Dongfang took a deep look at Tong Tu and asked. Tong Tu's eyes widened when he heard Yu Dongfang's words. Third senior brother, do you mean Duan Lingtian has mastered the same sword Dao as Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang? Even after the legendary Heavenly Emperor of the solitary destructive heaven became a god, his master, Gongsun Xinyuan, had not admired Duan Lingtian the most. Instead, he admired Duan Lingtian for creating his own Dao that was independent of the profundities of the law and greatly enhanced his combat prowess. That kind of Dao was what his master, Gongsun Xinyuan, dreamed of, and he had already touched the threshold. However, the legendary Heavenly Emperor of the solitary destructive heaven had already mastered this Dao. Master said that if he mastered this Dao, it would only be a matter of time before he became a god. Yu Dongfang's eyes shone brightly as he looked at Duan Lingtian. It said that Duan Lingtian only met Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang 100 years ago. I didn't expect his attainments in the Sword Dao to be so high. It feels like his attainments in the Sword Dao are on par with Master's attainments in the Sword Dao. Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang is truly a prodigy. Naturally, it was not difficult for Yu Dongfang to guess that Duan Lingtian's Sword Dao, which was independent of the profundities of the law, was imparted to him by Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang. Although Duan Lingtian had only met Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang for 100 years, he had obtained Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang's legacy in the mundane realm and had built a foundation for his Sword Dao. However, even if he had started building a foundation in the mundane realm, it was still shocking for him to achieve such a feat in just a few hundred years. As expected, it was important to walk the right path. For example, although his master was also a prodigy in the Sword Dao, he had wasted a lot of time because he had taken the wrong path several times. Duan Lingtian was certain his master would be able to comprehend his own Sword Dao as long as he had enough time. Similar to Yu Dongfang, other heavenly emperors and high-ranking officials from the Tidal Temple's branches in the Devata realms had also noticed Duan Lingtian's Sword Dao. It's Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang's Destruction Sword Dao. No wait, it doesn't seem like the Destruction Sword Dao. Although it feels like the Destruction Sword Dao, it contains the law of space. Moreover, it's cast with the law of space's transportation profundity. Now I understand why Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang accepted him as his disciple. He's a genius in the Sword Dao. He's so young, but he's already able to sense the Space Sword Dao from Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang's Destruction Sword Dao. If he masters the Space Sword Dao, he'll be another Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang. No. If he masters the Space Sword Dao, he'll surpass Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang's Destruction Sword Dao in both strength and strangeness. The Heavenly Emperors discussed among themselves. At the same time, they looked at Duan Lingtian with burning gazes. This was especially true for Tathagata. Feng Qingyang actually passed the Destruction Sword Dao to him. Does this mean that if I can fuse with his soul and receive his memories while I possess his body, I'll be able to master Feng Qing Yang's sword Dao as well? He's just a puny celestial emperor. It'll be a piece of cake for me to deal with him. Moreover, his strength is far inferior to Tathagata. I can't destroy Tathagata's soul, but I can destroy his soul. My own sword Dao. That's the only way to become a supreme powerhouse. Tathagata's eyes shone brightly. Celestial Emperor Feng. Ding Fu, the heavenly emperor of the primeval heaven, looked at Feng Qingyang in shock. You passed your destruction sword Dao to him? Moreover, he has already grasped its essence and has begun to comprehend his own space sword Dao? A complicated expression appeared on Ding Fu's face. Feng Qingyang nodded before a faint smile appeared on his face. The space sword Dao is barely satisfactory for now. That's barely satisfactory? Ding Fu almost vomited blood when he heard Feng Qingyang's words. At the same time, he glared at Wei Qi, who was standing next to him. Do you see that? This is your junior Uncle Feng's disciple. When you were his age, with your cultivation base, you wouldn't even be able to withstand a single move from him. Wei Qi smiled bitterly. Was he, the great celestial emperor Gulong, really that weak? He wanted to refute Ding Fu's words, but he did not dare to do so. After all, his master was like a father to him. Naturally, he also knew that although his master's words were unpleasant to the ears, what he said was the truth. If he were to fight the current Duan Ling Tian when he was Duan Ling Tian's age, not to mention one move, he would not even be able to withstand half a move. Based on Feng Qingyang's destruction sword Dao, he has already comprehended his space sword Dao. Moreover, he has even mastered it. Duan Ling Tian is truly monstrous. The high-ranking officials from the tidal temples in the Devata realms whispered among themselves with a hint of shock in their eyes. If he's given a few thousand years, he might be able to catch up to Feng Qingyang. That's not necessarily true. If he can grow stronger, why can't Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang? After all, Heavenly Emperor Feng Qingyang has already attained godhood. He still has a long way to go. At the very least, if he's given a few thousand years, he'll definitely catch up to Feng Qingyang. As the saying went, the connoisseur appreciates the skill while the layman appreciates the excitement. The heavenly emperors and high-ranking officials from the tidal temples in the Devata realms discussed Duan Lingtian's mastery of the space sword Dao, which was derived from Feng Qingyang's destruction sword Dao. However, 99% of the young geniuses in the spectator seats could not figure out what was going on. Only a few people seemed to have guessed what was going on, and their expressions turned grim. Most people were at a loss and puzzled. Since when did the law of space become so heaven-defying? My friend has also comprehended the law of space. However, his comprehension of the law of space is only slightly stronger than mine. Isn't this a little too exaggerated? What kind of technique is that? He defeated a two-star god of war without fusing the law of space? Heavens! That's a two-star god of war, not a nobody. The group of young geniuses could not figure out what was going on. After Duan Lingtian returned to the spectator seats, more than half of the people around him saw how terrifying his final sword strike was. I didn't expect you to have already come into contact with your own Dao. Naturally, Ling Juyun was the most shocked among the people around Duan Ling Tian. He was from a powerful clan in the divine offering land in the realms of gods. When he was young, he had heard from his elders that the laws and profundities were the same for everyone. However, not everyone had their own Dao. The 5 divine elements that others would not be able to obtain were all paths to becoming a supreme powerhouse. Of course, regardless of whether it was one's own Dao or the divine elements, not everyone who possessed them would be able to become a supreme being. Either one had not comprehended their Dao to the point where it was sufficient to become a supreme powerhouse, or the 5 divine elements had yet to transform into their final forms. Under such circumstances, one would not be able to become a supreme powerhouse. Did you comprehend your Dao on your own? Ling Jueyun asked solemnly. At the same time, a strange light flashed in his eyes. If Duan Lingtian had comprehended his own Dao at such a young age, he could be considered a peerless genius even in the realms of gods. If a supreme powerhouse wanted to recruit someone like him as a disciple, he would be given priority. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.